And hello, everybody. We're live. Welcome in Mysteries with Mr. Belgic. That's me. We are here today with the panel. We are here today for the first time with Vincent and Altug. Welcome aboard.
Thank you, Jerome. It's good to be aboard.
Regular one, Mr. Ned
Hi guys.
Dehan from BBOR, Black Box Online Radio. Ed, professor in
Hello.
biology. And Mr. Richard Grenell, ZodiacCipher.com.
Hi, everyone.
So thank you very much to have accepting my invitation, all. And today we are here to talk about Presidio Height, Paul Stine, because 3 days ago it was the anniversary of his death. So rest in peace, Paul. And we are going to talk about this incident which occurred on October 11, 1969. So if someone wants to start the show, go ahead, take the mic.
I nominate Richard Grinnell.
Mr.
Same.
Grinnell.
Right. Where do you want to start exactly? Do you want to start where the attack began?
Where you want, Richard? You are
Actually,
the
I would
expert.
like to start at Mason and Gary.
Okay.
Mason and Geary.
I would like to start with the Zodiac getting into Paul Stine's cab. You know,
Okay.
somebody asked me this question once, Richard. What was the Zodiac doing prior to getting into Paul Stine's taxi? And of course, we don't know, right? But we can speculate, we can take some guesses, and if we're going to do this deep dive into the Stine murder, you know, let's I'll just throw some stuff around.
Well, I probably believe he was maybe at the theatre. Kicking out time, I would have assumed, would have been 9, 9:30. Maybe as he spilled out of the theatre, he flagged down a taxi cab or went to the rank, and that's where he first came across Paul Stine. What I would like to know, though, is Leroy Sweet, the dispatcher, at 9:58, requested another cab go to the address 509th Street because Paul Stine hadn't arrived at that address. He last contacted Paul Stine at 9:45. Well, a 13-minute journey from Union Square, Mason and Geary, to that address is exactly 13 minutes. So why on earth, if he was expected to arrive at that address at 9:58, was he being contacted and another cab was ordered? There was no delay, was there? Stine wouldn't have been late. So my guess is when Leroy Sweet contacted the cab at 9:45, Zodiac was already in the cab, probably halfway into his journey or even further. And because he was only probably 5 minutes away from Washington and Cherry, that's probably why Leroy Sweet ordered another cab, because he thought, well, Stine should be there in just a few minutes. And when he wasn't, that's when he ordered another cab for that address. So I don't think when Leroy Sweet contacted him, he was at Union Square. So that's where I'd start it off.
Interesting. Yes.
Okay, Richard, that sounds like that's going to throw some water on all of these theories about Paul Stine being a specific target. The Zodiac was trying to get Paul Stine's taxi specifically. It sounds like then this was just done because of a taxi dispatcher making some decisions out of convenience or just expectations, or absolutely nothing malicious or sketchy going on part of the dispatcher. It just sounds like he made some approximations and some guesstimations. Is that fair?
I just think he knew that Paul Stine wasn't at Union Square when he contacted him at 9:45. Because, like I said, it's 13 minutes to 509th. I think that was the address where he should have got there at 9:58. So why is he ordering another taxi cab at 9:58? Stine isn't late. So my guess is Leroy Sweet believed he was either halfway into his journey or a lot closer to Washington Cherry than we believe. In other words, they could have been 5 minutes away from Washington and Cherry. And when Stine doesn't arrive a little bit further at that address, he then orders another taxi cab. So I think when Leroy Sweet contacted him at 9:45, he was already well into his journey.
Do we know how accurate these clocks are as far as the synchronization between, because this is a different era, now we have our satellites and all this stuff, but how accurate was the synchronization of all these clocks operating between?
Well, it doesn't have to be synchronized because both of these came from Leroy Sweet, the 9:58 and the 9:45.
Okay.
So we've not got discrepancy between multiple people.
Cool. I'm writing things down as you go, Richard, too, so I can kind of,
But also, since Druzer's here, he can talk about the notion that a gun was pulled on Stine many blocks before he arrived at Washington and Cherry.
Mm.
Yeah, it's possible. We've heard that Stine had been robbed before and had the intelligent policy not to let people in the front seat. But if someone is pointing a gun at you, you probably make an exception. Yeah, let me think about that for a minute, because I think there's arguments both ways. It's possible that it was a combination. He got in like a regular fare in the back seat downtown, and closer to the destination, perhaps at Maple. Maybe he got in with the gun and got himself into the front seat.
The reason I'm asking is because of those intraparenchymal injuries to his lungs, which could have been caused through collision with a steering wheel. And at autopsy, it said the blood didn't come from the head and go into the open spaces of the lungs. It was damage to the alveoli and the tissue of the lung itself that caused them to weigh heavier. And therefore, my theory was that the gun was pulled on him several blocks before, and Stine tried to put on the brakes quickly to disarm the guy, hit his chest on the steering wheel, which caused damage to the sensitive tissues to his lungs, and hence, I know Ed knows about this, that if you interfere with the lungs and the air transfer into the body, you can get something called cyanosis, which causes grey and dark blue discoloration to the extremities, such as the hands, the fingers, and the face. And he had a dark mark on the dorsal side of his left hand. That's why I brought up the question.
Yeah, that's correct.
The combination of two makes two injuries makes it harder to dismiss.
Mm-hmm. Big time.
Yeah, what I found, we are talking about blood, and before the stream we had a little chat. If you see, I have to ask Jerome, the two pictures of Stine hanging outside of the car. You see in one picture, in the first picture, the first picture, he is hanging out. Yeah, that's the first picture. You see there's almost no blood outside. And when you see another picture, that is the most used picture, you see a lot of blood. Normally, I think it's because the body went down, and you see that the head is lower than the upper torso. And because there were holes In the head, you see that the blood will go to the lowest point. That means that he was bleeding while there were pictures taken. And I think probably there were between the two pictures there maybe like 10 minutes, 7-10 minutes looking at the blood.
What's the question?
No, it's just checking the evidence we see on the pictures to make a good theory.
Stine was pulled into the floorboard of the passenger side by the killer. That's when he took the shirt. When the medical crew arrived about 7 minutes later, or however long it was quite a few minutes. Yeah. They pulled him out into that position and then took a picture. That's why there's no blood. And then, like you said, the second picture is after he bled for a while onto the pavement. Yeah, that's the only reason there's a discrepancy between those two images.
Yeah. Okay. And you also see that on the pictures you don't see any book, but on the picture there, when the body is removed, you see that there's a book lying. So probably that book was pulled out when he was pulled out.
Yeah, that probably proves that was on the passenger side, and therefore it wasn't likely that Zodiac sat in the passenger side on top of a book during the whole journey.
And why don't we see the book on the street in the first photo, do you think?
Because you only see the book on the street after he was dragged out.
Right. So when this first picture is taken, the body is over it, presumably. Then they pull it out. That's when it falls. That's why we see the big pool of blood. Okay.
Absolutely.
And the recession there in the center of the blood, is that just because of uneven pavement?
Yeah, I think that's the case. Yeah.
Yeah.
Looks like it from the photo that part of the ground is uneven.
Richard, do we know what the book is?
It's an A to Z, isn't it? Directory. A street guide. Sorry.
Yeah. The picture, the one below, I think. There's always the discussion about a window that was open at the driver's seat, and if you see that the little square ventilation window is open.
Have we tested? Does anyone know if this book has been tested or preserved or anything?
Nope. Nope, we don't know. I mean,
but it sounds like it was not the same book as in the Ray Davis case, which I'm sure a lot of people are going to jump on in a second. But the book that was found in Ray Davis's taxi back in '62.
Yeah. Yeah. You see there the square window. No, I'm sorry. Yeah. The triangle window is open, so you didn't need to have your square window open because it was for ventilation. And you also see a reflection of something in the window, the two dots. So I think the car window is closed.
Well,
looking at the picture.
If this is flash photography, if it's closed, I presume we're going to see a big bright hot spot coming from that window. I mean, I don't know for sure even if this is flash photography, but I feel like I would expect to see more lighting artifacts in that window if that's closed. I don't know for sure. It's a little hard to say. It's very small in here, but.
But then, what are the two dots that are on the window that I was talking about? Like, why are there two dots there if this is an open window? Shouldn't it just be a blank space?
Right.
They could also be film artifacts too. We have to. It's a possibility. I thought that was on my phone. Oh no. Okay.
Okay. In the very upper picture, the most upper picture we have here. Yeah, you see the picture taken from that window, and what you also see is that on the right, you see you see the background, the door of the passenger, and you see that when you go right, you see it gets darker, and again it gets lighter. So, and you see like a stripe of light, and I think that's a reflection of the camera. So I think the window was closed.
I think if the window's open,
Okay,
that is
no.
mentioned in the first report. It's key evidence if it was. And I don't think
Yeah.
it was.
And
But
also
this is
you
going to
see
become
the
very important
net.
because, well, it's just this is what my understanding of the Zodiac's activities after Paul Stine's been murdered and the Robbins kids hear what's going on. The Robbins kids, of course, are the people who provided the details for the composite sketch that we have most famously come to know. And that is that they see the Zodiac in the front seat of the taxi with what appears to be putting Paul Stine on his lap. But I don't think that's what happened. I think that's the Zodiac pushing Paul Stine's body toward the floorboards and keeping him toward the floorboards. Lindsay Robbins reported in his interview to Jim Dean that he could even see the glint of a knife as the Zodiac is cutting off the piece of Paul Stine's shirt. Then the Zodiac gets out of the passenger side door and walks around to the driver's side. Then he goes back, and that is when he exits. Now, the Zodiac would say in his letter that the reason why he's walking around the cab is because he's leaving false clues to throw off the police. But if the Zodiac didn't have the window open on the driver's side, he wouldn't have been able to reach in or wipe down anything. And that would mean that if any evidence was collected from the inside of the driver's side door, a lot of it, not all of it, but a lot of it could be just, unrelated to the Zodiac. Because, I mean, I'm not going to lie to you, Ed. I had visualized it in my mind for so long that I thought the window was down. So the Zodiac comes over and he just does a big wipe across that panel, or maybe even the steering wheel or something. But if that window is closed the whole time, that means that there's just fewer chances for the Zodiac to leave evidence on the driver's side. I don't know what anyone else thinks.
Yeah,
Well,
it sounds logical.
I agree with the fact that I don't think Paul Stine was in the lap of the killer. I don't think anybody. I know he wasn't in his right mind, but he wasn't stupid enough to shoot a man in the head who was bleeding profusely, stick it in the middle of his lap when he knows he's got to walk several blocks. That makes no sense at all. I think it's just the angle the kids viewed the cab at that they misinterpreted where the head was in relation to him.
Ned, what I'm wondering about is, the patent print between the driver's side window and the rear driver's side window. There's a patent print left on the pillar there. If that window is closed, why is that print there? If he's got his right hand on the door pillar, what's he doing with the left side of his body if that window is closed? Maybe leaning down.
I don't know. Yes, I've also heard that's where those prints were found, as you called it the pillar, and that's like the space in between the passenger side, the driver's side window and the seat and behind it, like that. You mean that space right there? That's where it's found, right? Oh, Vincent, you're muted if you're saying something.
Yeah, I'm near an airport, so I have to mute every time. Yeah, it's right in that space between the two doors. You can see them in the responder photographs. We have a picture around the driver's side of the cab, if we have that, you should see a big glaring patent bloody print right there on that pillar. It's the opposite side of the vehicle, though. You can go around.
Well, now, is it possible that the two dots we've been talking about on the window are just like this one that Jerome has right here? Is it possible that that is something behind the car, like those are lights or something from, the street?
Yes, or even worse, it could be film artifacts from the development process. I'm not
But
sure.
okay, but you can discuss the fact that the triangle window is open. Why would you ventilate if you have your window open, your big window?
It may have been opened and then
I see the
also
triangle
rolled
open
after the fact. I'm not sure.
Okay, that's true.
And then just you neglected to close that again.
I have another question. Maybe someone wants to answer it, if I may. As far as I know, he cuts the piece from the shirt from the backside of the shirt. But the position in which I see Stine laying there, it seems to me very difficult. Why did he not rip it off from the front side? That's my question here.
The bodies move positions. It was down on the floorboards, and the medical responders have now rolled the body back up.
Yeah. Oh, okay. He gets in this position later. So, as far as I understand, then he slumps on the steering wheel, and he basically lifts the jacket and then cuts the part of the shirt.
It's probably the shirt tail. So if Stine's shirt's tucked in, he's pulled the tail out and then sliced it off, and that's what that might explain why you get such a clean sort of. Because I have to look at these shirt pictures again, but I think it's a very clean rectangular sort of thing.
Yeah, it's
tail, all in one go. Kind of.
Yeah, looks like a very sharp knife. I think maybe a short one, but because I'm not expert in it, but it was a bit strange for me, to think like, how did he get that part of the shirt when most of the pictures shows Stine in a position where that would be rather difficult, So, okay, thanks for answering.
Because he was bleeding profusely, he wanted to probably push him into the passenger well to keep the blood away from him, and that would have naturally revealed his back portion of his shirt when he pulled up the jacket. So I think, and also he got in the cab, so he's got a little bit of protection there as he gets in the cab, pulls the driver down to the passenger well, and then the back will be partially exposed. Then that's probably why.
He pulls up the jacket and then just cuts in, and then basically when he gets out, lets him drop.
If he pulls him down face up, first of all, he has a job getting in the cab, and then he's got to sort of lean over him, and there's more blood on the front side. Maybe he wanted to take a piece of shirt originally without any blood on it, and he maybe thought he wouldn't get blood on his hands from taking shirt from the rear of the shirt. But clearly there was a little bit of blood on the rear of the shirt as well. So, but I think it was just about the way he maneuvered the body.
No, I think what the kids, the witnesses said, that he was kind of cleaning the inside of the cab. Maybe I think he kind of collected more blood with that piece that he had. Maybe it was not, the part he cut out, it was not bloody enough. So maybe the kids thought he's trying to wipe off some prints, but maybe he was just trying to get that piece of shirt more soaked in blood,
He's also wiping the driver's side door handle, which wouldn't conceivably have Stine's blood on it. So the question, why wipe that area specifically? And then I also want to point out how quickly these events are happening, because from the time that Stine's killed to when Pelicetti and responders arrive is like minutes. So he's done all of this, cut the shirt, he's gone around the side of the cab, he's moved the body around, he's done this, and all in the time before Pelicetti, Calc, and these guys get there. So however he's cut the shirt, it's probably very quickly. It's probably the shirt tail, and he takes the knife and he just cuts the shirt tail.
I think he may have used an instrument to get the tear started on the shirt, but they seem pretty sure that he used his fingers for the rest. But as Richard has pointed out, he couldn't have known what kind of shirt some random cab driver would be wearing. If it was denim, he'd be out of luck. So he may have brought something to get it started. But after he does that, that's when he goes around to the driver's side. So he's got blood on him at that point. So that's probably the transfer to the driver door.
Yeah, and how does he tear the hem of a shirt? That's pretty thick.
Absolutely.
That'll follow the seam. So if the tear is not on the seam, that would be very impressive for Zodiac to have ripped through solid fabric. If it's a seam tear, then of course you get that started and rip. As far as I know, it's this weird rectangular shaped segment that's right out of the back of the shirt. I don't know how that.
And it's a very neat rectangle from the photos too. But yes, Druzer, Tom Boyd even made a similar statement once, talking about, directing us all to a report, kind of saying that yes, it appears, that it's cut first and then manually torn. And then it is quite shocking that the Zodiac would be able to make such a neat rectangle simply by tearing it. He may have done 3 cuts very quickly, but and then he is using his hands. But if they think that was torn manually, I'm going to go with it.
Yeah, and it may well have been the rag that he used outside the cab, unless he had the foresight to take a rag additionally.
I think it was the shirt. I really do. I think he wiped down the cap with his bloody shirt piece.
I think in one of the Department of Justice reports, probably the first one written by someone in Sacramento, I guess, there is a list of possible items that could be in the possession of the Zodiac, given he is caught. And I think they list a small knife in that report. Not like one he used at Berryessa, but they just mention a small knife. And I think maybe that small knife that they mentioned there is connected to the Presidio killing, because a small knife would be quite handy, I think, to quickly cut out a piece of shirt and having it cut out neatly, So maybe he had a knife with him, I think, or maybe Department of Justice also thinks that he must have had that kind of a thing with him. Maybe it was something they found after they did an analysis of the shirt, like what was used for the cutting. So maybe they know something about it, but it's maybe not explicitly featured in any of the reports. But they talk about a small knife.
Yeah, some people said, I don't know who that were, but some people said we're talking about a carpenter knife, just like a Stanley knife.
Yeah, I mean,
we don't know.
Yeah, I understand.
Remember, anything Zodiac brings to the cab, he has to have concealed, because he doesn't want Stine to see, oh, this guy's got a bayonet on him like he had at Berryessa or something on his belt. It's going to be something, presumably you're going to fold it or push it down on a spring and put it in your pocket along with the firearm. And it makes me wonder about the firearm, because why is he using an automatic? This is the whole other, rabbit hole to go down. And I want to stay on the knife, but I do think whatever it was a concealable type blade, not some monstrous.
How do we know the glint of the knife described by the 3 teenagers wasn't the glint of scissors?
Hey, that's a smart remark.
Richard.
Yeah,
I think it's a possibility. I think just recently we had a discussion, and I asked someone, it could be scissors, because I find the cut to be very clean, except maybe for the corner where it seems a bit more like torn or not so perfectly cut, but it looks quite perfectly cut to me, if you ask me.
Clearly, this was planned, taking the shirt piece.
Yes.
Yeah, if it was a scissor, it was planned. Yeah, of course.
Yeah, well, what would you take if you were going to commit this crime and take shirt piece? I wouldn't take a knife. I wouldn't use my hands. I'd take scissors.
Yeah.
Well, as Cheryl has written here in the chat, giving a shout out to Cheryl Birch, who says it would be difficult to get the horizontal cut that accurate with a knife going against the bias. And, I guess I've always expected that it was a knife, but as Cheryl brings this point up, yes, that would be difficult to do this. As even Vincent said, this is happening just kind of, 1, 2, 3 steps right after one another. And this is going to tie into a bigger point that we're going to talk about later on. This really seems like someone
but I think there is some sort of an irregularity in the horizontal cut when you look at the image, it's like it goes kind of straight, but then it has this, I don't know, this little bump or something like that. So maybe initially the point where he stuck the knife, it went a bit, wavy, and then he got it straight after he gave it more strength, So it could be still a knife, but probably we need to consider that it was something sharp and where he could really do some precise cuts, I think.
One thing I like about this idea of holding the shirt tail and slicing through it is you get all of those cuts at the same time, but that of course would need to be supported by the geometry of this. If I grab a shirt tail in a bunch like this and just slice through that bunch, you're going to get that whole shirt tail in one shot. But if it's a perfectly straight edge, that's an issue for that hypothesis.
So look how straight it looks, and on the right side of this image, you will see how it's, I don't know, maybe it's a bit misleading, the picture, but on the right side, I think that this is a bit, I don't know, uneven, or something is not regular like on the other part. Also, he doesn't cut the whole part of it. I think he stops somewhere at the middle of both sides. So it's it would be difficult with a not very sharp instrument to pull that through, to make this kind of a cut. So I guess we must consider that it was really a sharp instrument. I don't know, maybe people who are in who are tailors or in that kind of business, they would probably know about the kind of cutting instruments they have in that industry. So maybe it's some sort of a tool that comes from that industry. Or from that
profession. And also giving a shout out to Angela Blevins, who isn't here right now. She's the webmaster of ZodiacKillerX.com, and her Zodiac suspect is named Mike Klein, and he was a driver for Levi Strauss, the jeans company. And she said that part of his duties would be to regularly carry a short knife similar to an X-Acto knife, is what I would call it. But apparently, according to her, that was something that was common, that was carried at those times to cut fabric. So yes, I mean, these things would exist, and a very sharp type of blade that is designed purely to cut fabric. And as somebody said, cutting through the hem of the shirt, they make the incision first, then they start tearing it, ripping it, and then across the side. And yeah, Dehan says the adrenaline he likely got from the killing would have made tearing any kind of material a lot easier, you'd think. Fair enough. Fair enough.
Why do it? Why take the shirt piece in the first place if it wasn't just for horror? Because he had other items he could have sent, which he retrieved much quicker.
Richard.
He's wanted.
It's in this time to prove this. Here's a bloodstained piece of his shirt. I'm sure that this was a very theatrical line. I'm sure it was planned in that sense for him to go, I want a bloody piece of a shirt that I can send via the mail. It's not too heavy weight, so you can put postage on it easily. And then that alone is going to be just shock value.
Yeah. Couple points. I think the shirt fabric that he was wearing would actually be quite easy to tear, but he wouldn't have known that, so he may have brought a device. I think the report that you're referring to is from the DOJ, where it mentions the small knife. And I think it's relevant that it was at this point that they had connected him to the Riverside crime, which was done with a 3 to 3.5 inch blade. So that's probably the reference that you were seeing there.
Okay. Yeah, I understand. So it's probably more about Riverside than Presidio, what they had in mind when they talked about that. It's a good point.
I also wanted to raise that several years ago, there was someone in the fabric industry that weighed in on the shirt, and they said it's absolutely torn with fingers.
Did you notice? Did you notice when Jack Stilts, the Vallejo cop, questioned the letter writer to send in more details? And two of the examples he gave before he asked the killer to send in more material was he said that the only evidence given was the description of the victim's clothing and the bullet casings retrieved and the bullets used. And I wonder at that point, when the Zodiac heard this, did he think to himself, my descriptions of the clothing wasn't good enough, now I'll actually send in a piece of clothing? And that may have been the instigation, because Jack Stilts wanted him to prove. And if you remember in the Stine letter, he said, to prove I'm the killer, here is a bloodstained piece of his shirt.
It was certainly a response to them pretending not to believe that he was the killer after they received the first letters. They continued the ruse after Lake Berryessa. It seems obvious to me that they're goading him to send more communications and hope that he'll make a mistake. He went out of his way in all of these crimes to prove his involvement. So I think he wasn't taking any chances with them not believing him. He wasn't taking any chances with the victim surviving. But we also have to remember the showmanship angle of Zodiac. He's doing this for fun. No one's telling him to do it. So whether that's a Jack the Ripper inspiration or whatever, I think he just thought it would be cooler to take the shirt than a wallet or the. I mean, of course, he did take the wallet, but sending in something like that is sure, it gets the job done, but it's not as interesting for reporters to write about.
Have we clarified? Oh, sorry, carry on.
Sorry. I just want to say something about the swatch teared with fingers before I answer your question, Richard. I think they found gloves in the cab, and my question here would be, if he uses gloves, let's say to not get bloodied fingers, how would he rip it with the fingers? I think it would maybe be more difficult to rip a shirt when you have gloves on your hands, or maybe he removed the gloves and then got blood on his hands, and I don't know, but it's not a good idea to then smear your bloody hands on the car's side. So it makes me think that it's more probable that he used the cutting instrument while he had his gloves on rather than using his fingers. But it's speculation. I mean, I can't prove anything. It's just an additional question, let's say, about this. And for Richard's question, why the shirt? I think basically that this crime was so much out of order, out of the previously established criminal profile of the Zodiac, that if he wouldn't send a piece of shirt about this crime, probably it would have taken months or a lot of speculation to actually tie this crime to the Zodiac. I mean, people thought it's an ordinary robbery. It's one of the usual crimes in the Presidio, and even if someone would speculate like, oh, this could be the Zodiac, how do you really prove it? Okay, and I think it really matters.
I agree with Druzer. Yeah. I agree with Druzer. He could have sent a letter with the same handwriting, and then we always had to think like, okay, it's the writer, but is he the killer? And now we have a piece of evidence sent with him, so it's it was really to show, hey, I'm the killer.
Yeah. Otherwise, it would be something like Donald S. Did he do it? Kathleen Jones, did he do it? Riverside, did he do it? But when he adds the piece of shirt, he definitely ties himself to the crime. And I think it's very important for him that this crime is tied to him, because it totally changes the perception about him. He's suddenly this guy who goes around in the Presidio, it's no longer the rural, the Lover's Lane killer who has specific targets, but suddenly he's like this omnipresent guy who can strike anywhere, and apparently he can kill just anyone. So it's at his whim totally. So I think if his goal was to change the perception of himself in the press, in law enforcement, etc., then this piece of shirt, it played a central role to actually. It was the lever to get the opinion change into this new perception of him. And I think this is part of him trying to reposition himself, his criminal profile, his identity. And it's not just a shirt. You see it in so many things that he changes. A lot of people say he changes MO all the time, etc. But here it's not just MO. You see change in victimology, you see change in location. So I think this is really more an attempt to change how we knew him. And that's why the shirt is very important here. Only with the shirt this crime becomes so striking. Without the shirt, probably people would not perceive this threat. There would be a lot of speculation and lots of discussions, and probably the Presidio murder would have not been discussed so much in the media, because you don't know. It's just speculation. Maybe one or two papers would follow it a bit, but it would not be this big thing,
For sure.
Zodiac in San Francisco, So I think the goal is that the piece of shirt is very crucial in that. So it serves this purpose, I think.
Okay, we know we absolutely need the Stine letter to know this is even a Zodiac offense, basically, because if you look at just the forensics, just the circumstances, and just the facts of the situation, there's really no way to tie it to the letter writer who executed Faraday or who killed Darlene Faraday. But we also see Zodiac's doing a lot of weird things that don't make sense. Like, why cut the shirt 3 times if he only needs to take a bunch of it and cut through that? His psychology is very strange.
He sent it in another letter.
Yeah.
Another piece.
Do you know the easiest way of linking himself through the Stine letter was just writing by knife in the Stine letter? That would have linked him to the Lake Berryessa crime. So he didn't need a shirt piece to link himself to a crime, because that was withheld.
No, but I think something else. He was seen as the guy that killed kids, and now he killed a guy. So the problem is, now everyone can be killed by him.
Exactly. So to me, it looks more like an attempt to kind of, forget about the past, what I did in the North Bay area. Now I'm, this guy, this is something new. Prepare for what's coming. I will kill school children. I will do this. I will do that. So I also see here a dimension where he kind of tries to create a fear about the future and not so much about the past. And just think about what it creates in the press and in law enforcement. And for example, Lake Berryessa just happens just 2 weeks ago, and the topic becomes kind of dropped. It's suddenly all about San Francisco. It's all about Presidio. So it also makes me think if he kind of wants to steer the discussion away from Lake Berryessa to Presidio. for reasons of, I don't know, maybe he just doesn't want Lake Berryessa to be the top on the agenda. And we can guess why reasons for that, you know. So much has been found out about him after Hartnell has survived, etc. And I think he doesn't want that information to go around. He doesn't want that to be the headlines. So in 2 weeks he comes up with a different plan, totally different crime when you compare it to his past. And so to me it's kind of a, you know, how would you say that? Some sort of a black ops thing or something, you know. You totally change the topic with very specific crime, you know. So that's how I see it, but not a lot of people agree with me on that.
Yeah,
Well, I
maybe
want to
you're right.
jump in on this one because
Oh,
this is
yeah,
some good
Ned.
stuff. But you know, you guys have shared some very big points. But as you guys know, I always like to bring this stuff back to Jack the Ripper, and I've said for a very long time, I think the Zodiac was intentionally trying to imitate Jack the Ripper. And why did he cut the shirt piece into multiple pieces? Because Jack the Ripper's From Hell letter contains a portion of a kidney that was mailed. And, you know, the Zodiac didn't have to cut the shirt piece at all. As you guys have said multiple times, he had Paul Stine's wallet. He could have mailed in the items from the wallet. He could have mailed in the entire wallet, the keys, or something like that. He could have stolen something from the taxi. It was purely unnecessary to cut the shirt. Number one, horrific, macabre elements. That's what it does. And also, I think that it's something that people would associate more with the crime scene. Maybe it's easier to have blood on it. I've always thought that he wanted a bloodstained piece of the shirt, but we do have actually Druzer, you posted this in the chat, though. There's another question that says, would he have threatened children if he hadn't realized that he was witnessed by 3 youths in the newspaper the morning after the attack? Now, I also want to address this because I think this depends on who the Zodiac was. And giving credit to Pat Brown, she's asked this question, which is, it's an interrogative statement. The Zodiac may have threatened children if he were a disgruntled employee of a school, a disgruntled teacher, maybe somebody like a disgruntled bus driver, someone who works around kids. So the Zodiac is threatening children. Well, maybe his personality, lifestyle, and occupation encouraged him to threaten children. That's just something that she has thrown out, but I think that is contingent upon knowing what the Zodiac's occupation was. So I know I gave 2 things right there, but back over to you guys.
Yeah, that's fine. I want to add something here. I think that the threat towards the children, it kind of, how would you say that? It makes everything look more grave. You know, there's the guy who suddenly changes everything about himself and kills someone in the presidio, and then he also threatens to kill school children. So I think that would alert law enforcement a lot, and it would probably make them focus more on if he's going to strike in San Francisco again, you know. So I think he kind of probably wants law enforcement's efforts to be more focused on what he's threatening to do. So that could be some sort of a manipulation, in my opinion. And there's a second thing which I find always very interesting. I think in the next letter, either in the dripping pen card or in the bus pump letter, he says something like, "I wouldn't kill children." You know, I said that in the letter, but if you think I'm going to kill school kids, you deserve a bullet in your head, he said. So he kind of takes that back later. Why, I don't know. Maybe his threat, it created too much of pressure, you know. Maybe he thought, I overdid it, you know. I wanted law enforcement's attention more towards San Francisco, but now it was too much, so he plays that down somehow. I don't know if you
What do you
remember that.
But what do you
scene
think
there.
of that? You get the public more scared because normally he
Yeah,
was only killing in secluded areas,
yeah,
teenagers, and now he had
mhm,
a guy, a young guy, but still a guy and a male,
mm,
and in an area everybody could now be a victim of him in the
yeah.
future. And he also
Mm.
tells in the later letters, he says, "I won't tell you anymore. It could be look like
Exactly.
suicides or
Mm,
accidents." So
yeah.
yeah, everyone
He-
can be a victim now.
yeah. And he can basically tie himself to every crime now, which basically
True.
helps
Yes.
him or enables him to manipulate, to mislead. He can, add crimes to his score at will, and each time he adds a crime that is different, that looks different from the other ones. It's like I think it confuses everyone about the criminal profile because you look for a pattern, but he tries to unpattern basically what he's doing. And there is another thing which he takes back later. For example, with the bus bomb threat. He threatens to put a bomb in a bus somewhere, etc. But at some point, for example, he again draws a limit. He says, kind of, uh, yes, I'm planning to put a bomb somewhere, but I didn't put that bomb in the cop's car. So he does that twice, claiming something, but then taking it back in later letters. And I have no idea why he's doing it, uh,
Well, Altug, I have a question
but
for
why
you.
he's doing it. Yeah,
Why is
sorry.
it a problem if the Zodiac has done too much? Why is it a problem if he has created a larger threat than he expected? Because his whole
Uh,
to scare, to terrorize. I mean, he's threatening to kill people. Why would he care at all if they're starting to like misperceive his threats or they think his threats are bigger than they were intended to be? Isn't that the whole
I,
point?
I think it maybe it puts you too high up in, but I think LE and they all have limited resources, etc. But when you really stand out, I think they use more resources on you. Maybe the FBI gets involved stronger and things like that. Maybe he reads somewhere in papers that now more people are looking into his case, etc. Probably reading about meetings of these different police departments led by the Department of Justice, etc. So he doesn't want that much of he. Let's say he likes the attention, but he probably is not happy with seeing that there's now more effort to catch him. In the end, he's a guy who doesn't want to be caught. So I see it a bit like this. I'm not saying it's a fact. I'm just thinking loud, like all of us here.
There,
Um,
there
But
is
we
an
can agree that the Stine murder was so differently, and that was something that turned the whole thing upside down.
yeah,
Agreed, everyone?
yeah. I
Mostly.
100% agree.
Yeah,
there.
I think after the Lake Berryessa crime, as we've said before, he was accused of being a sex fiend, and he was accused of targeting the women more. That may be one
Mm,
reason why he switched to a lone male,
yeah.
to prove he can
Uh,
kill single men.
mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, and as I said, it's that amounts to a change in victimology, because previous victimology is basically couples in premarital or extramarital affairs, and but then you suddenly have this totally different victim, and it seems like he takes things away in that crime, and in the others he absolutely doesn't. He actually rejects, Hartnell offers his wallet, offers him to write a check, etc. He says first he's interested, but he's not taking it, and takes nothing from Margot. So he basically doesn't take away something. And I don't know if you agree with this, but when I think about the ring that Faraday had in his fingers when he was found, so maybe Faraday also offered him something. I have like 50, 65 cents that my mom gave me, and I can give you this ring. And so he didn't take it. So he never takes something, even if he has opportunity. But in the Stine murder, he takes wallet, he takes car keys, he takes piece of shirt. So I think that's also very different. It changes victimology, it changes important parts of the MO. Location is already different. Motive this time looks like robbery, whereas in the previous crimes, no one could really establish motive. So it's so different. It's so un-Zodiac, when you think about it. It often strikes me as like, why this kind of a crime when you had already something going on? You have carried it up to a full-fledged fantasy, executional fantasy with the hood, etc. So it's like he's ready to go on that path, but kind of when Hartnell survives, it's all blown up, and then he does this sharp turn to 2 weeks later, does this sharp turn to a crime that totally is not him, and it gets you wondering why this sharp turn.
Well, Al-Tug, I want to respond to your challenge question there. If you're asking that as a challenge question, one thing could be that he's trying to do things that are increasing his level of thrill, that are more exhilarating for him. And Lakeberry S, okay, he's wearing the hood and the costume and telling the story, message on the car door. But some people believe that it would actually be more exhilarating to commit a crime in a populated area and walk away in a city, knowing that he's going to be having the potential to be witnessed by who knows how many people. And he was even witnessed by police officers. And pretty much he just got lucky. But I know Druzer has something, so he can continue.
Oh, sorry. Ned, you were talking about walking away. I have to leave now because my time's up. So I'm wishing you all the best, and hope to speak to you soon, guys. And thank you for having me here, Jerome. It was nice. Thank you.
See you, Eduard. Take care.
Bye. Take care.
It was nice having Vincent on here as well. I think it was about 8 o'clock in the morning for him. So he made a good effort.
But I think he's not on. Is he still on, Vincent? I think he left also.
He go home and he connect himself on his.
Okay.
Yeah, he might be back later. There's kind of an important correction that I had to make in the bus bomb letter. He didn't say if you thought I would kill school children, you deserve bullets in your head. He said in this manner or in this way. If you think I would take on a bus like that, you got to be crazy. And then on the next letter or the next page of the letter, then he describes the next way that he's going to kill children with the bus bomb. So he was sort of giving himself an out for having not successfully used sniper tactics to take on a bus. But make no mistake, there's still a threat on the children. And he was particularly upset because they didn't print that. in the first time he wrote it in the Stine letter.
Oh, I don't know about that, and I don't know the dates when things were printed or not, or were withheld. But still, it was kind of interesting for me to see that somehow he plays it down, even though he goes back to it. So there is this, I don't know, this hesitation maybe that you see, kind of hesitation maybe. Don't know if it's significant, uh, but it's still strange in my opinion.
Well, it's all in keeping though. Like what your thoughts about now? It's a totally different crime. Well, he admits that, and it obviously sort of signals the next phase of his communications. You know, he's telling them any crime that's committed, be it in the country or in the big city, could be me. Could look like an everyday cab robbery, which is what they 100% would have thought the Stine crime was had he not alerted them.
And Kim
True, though.
Rossmo made a good point. He said, in a city or a town that you're less familiar with, then you pick a victim that you can take to a location. Whereas in all the other crimes, the locations he would have known and he was familiar with them. But he governs the destination in a place he's less familiar with.
Richard, though, like, I mean, we got so many things to respond to here because, I mean, firstly, Kim Rossmo does great stuff. I mean, he is also the real deal. I completely give him credit. But it's like, one thing, though, that somebody pointed out, and it was QCS, Queen City Stripes, that the location of Presidio Heights actually is rather close to the bridge that goes towards Sausalito, California. And maybe the location was someplace that he was extremely familiar with. And he was setting this up purely as a set of getaway tactics. And I guess that would be my kind of leading theory that I'd be going with right now, even though I can't prove it in a court of law. That's just something I'm thinking about.
Yes, the Presidio, if anything went wrong, gave him a nice escape plan. Plus, also, if he lived in Vallejo, he can get out the city in about 8 minutes. But it's quite conceivable that I believe he was a Vallejo resident, but he could easily, after the first 2 crimes, have moved to San Francisco, and he was heading that way. So there's 3 options there. But he could have worked near the area, and that's why he was familiar with that part of the city and less familiar with the other part of the city. Now, he didn't want to take the cab right onto his doorstep, but he took it somewhere he knew was familiar to him, and he had a good plan set up, which wasn't too close to his own residence. That's maybe why he was on foot. That's another way of thinking about it.
Sure.
But
and guys, for this episode, I was hoping that we could kind of do some breakdowns of what we think happened at Presidio Heights, because now might be a very good time to do that. And, just kind of think, what did the Zodiac do after the murder? And as we've already talked about, okay, he's at Paul Stine's taxi. He acquires the items. We've got a couple of those things. The first thing that I would like to do is actually talk about 2 opinions that have been shared. One was from Tahoe 27, who said that the Stine murder was the least sophisticated crime committed by the Zodiac. And I always partner that with a statement from our good friend Thomas Henry Horan, who says that the Stine murder actually shows the highest level of crime scene awareness. Everything that the Zodiac is doing almost indicates that he is somewhat aware of how much time he has, the way that police are going to look at the taxi cab. And Vincent was talking about how he's doing all of these things in a short amount of time. Crime scene awareness. Then he walks down the street and giving a shout out to Dennis D, who talks about how the Zodiac may have seen Falcon's Elms. Then he goes into the alcoves of the houses in Presidio Heights, and he's actually hiding there for a period of time. And it's possible that multiple people could even be walking past him. What I think the Zodiac did is that he was altering his appearance, like total Clark Kent style, taking off the glasses, maybe doing something like turning his jacket inside out, putting on a hat or something like that. So then, if he were to reemerge, anybody who saw him would be looking at a completely different person. And Robert Graysmith even talks about this, in his Zodiac books, that maybe the Zodiac killer had a vehicle stationed nearby. Presidio Heights was chosen for that reason. And as Richard said, 8 minutes to Vallejo, or as I said, cross the bridge to Sausalito. And I really don't think he would be intercepted by anybody if he actually went straight to a vehicle after altering his appearance, or maybe it's a different type of foot plan, so to speak. But all right, you guys have heard my take on the subject, and I'll turn it back to you.
Well, I don't think he altered his appearance when he got to anywhere on the route to the park, because the three teenagers, Donald Falk and the people that observed a man running into the park all gave virtually similar descriptions of the killer. So, and then if you look at the bus bomb letter, he said the dogs never came within 2 blocks of me.
Yeah.
We know the dogs accumulated by Julius Kahn Playground, so he may have been two blocks east. And then his next statement said the motorcycles went by traveling from south to northwest. Now we know the corner of Presidio Park, which is the southeastern corner. Presidio Boulevard travels from south to northwest, which is where the motorcycles would have been circling around. My guess, he was in that far corner of the park and then exited when he had a chance and went down the Leon steps. And that's probably where a vehicle was located, if there was one at all.
Okay, Richard, does this mean that you accept the Zodiac's account in the letter? You don't think he fabricated any of those details about the dogs and the motorcycle races?
Well, I don't see the purpose in fabricating it. This is a month later. He's got nothing to gain other than rubbing their noses in their boo-boos. So I think he was telling the truth, because if he wasn't telling the truth to some extent, they would have known. I know they called him a liar, but I think that was just to agitate him and probably get him to write more material. But I don't think there's anything to be gained by lying in that instance, just like there was nothing to be gained by lying at Blue Rock Springs. He wants to prove
well, as you said,
he was there.
He could he could be insulting the police, but I guess I was a little bit persuaded by Jeremy Berthium, author of So I See You Don't Paint Houses, when he says that after the Stine murder, the Zodiac highlights a certain section in his letter that says must print in paper, talking about the 2 cops pulling a goof. And he's like, that part was most likely true. That's why he wanted it published in the paper, and then he fudged everything else. He made up all of those details about hiding in the park and the dogs didn't come within 2 blocks of me and such. And I guess I was persuaded by that simply because lying, deception, throwing people off, confusing people, all of it. The Zodiac was known to do these things.
What I find really strange is, if I believe he went eastwards towards the corner of the park by the Leon steps, if he'd have gone down those steps onto that road and traveled north, I think Druzer knows what I'm going to say now. He would have been heading straight to Beach Street. And that was what he mentioned in the letter 4 days before the Stine murder, Beach Street. So I think it's uncanny that a letter arrives 4 days before the Stine murder. And if he travels to that corner of the park and travels north, he's heading to Beach Street. It's bordering the Presidio. And that's one hell of a coincidence, I think.
Could be. I'll give you that one, Richard.
I see also 2 possibilities. First one, his accomplice was waiting in a car. Second one, maybe he paid a visit to a friend or mistress living in this area. So we stop on Maple Street or Cherry Street. Yes, Cherry Street. And he was waiting by somebody, maybe a friend, maybe a girl, I don't know. And that's maybe why he was in this area and in the same times committing a murder, and after goes with a girl, or I don't know, it could be something really hot for him, really full of adrenaline and something like this. Or the first proposition, yeah, maybe his accomplice, if he had an accomplice, was waiting for him in one of the streets parallel to Washington, Jackson Street, perhaps. Um, yeah, this is the two possibility I saw.
Do you think he could have been living in the Marina district?
That's possible, yeah. That's possible. Or somebody he knows. He knew
Do you know?
somebody.
Do you know why I'm asking, Druzer?
I'm distracted by the by Cat Daddy in the chat.
Do you know why I'm asking why he lived in the? He may have lived in the Marina district if he was heading that way.
Go for it.
Well, a few months after the Stine murder, Donna Lass moved from 4122 Balboa to 225 Mallorca Way. Now, Mallorca Way, now that 56 Beach Street that I mentioned in his letter on October the 7th was an old planning map number. And the real number was, what was it, 1654 Beach Street? Stroke 1656 Beach Street. That address he mentioned on October the 7th, before the Stine murder, was only 300 meters from where Donna Lass eventually moved to. And if you remember, in 1971, he mentioned targeting her as victim number 12 when she was still back in the Presidio. That would be uncanny that he mentions an address in a letter before the Stine murder, which is only 300 meters from where Donna Lass lived at that time. Well, because she moved into that address, I think, in 1970. Zodiac may have already been living there when she moved to that address. That's a bit of a theory, but it's not beyond possibility.
No, well, that's the thing, is he's so confident that he's not going to be identified, in my mind, that he's letting loose all kinds of information that a criminal would normally not give out. So yeah, it's possible. If we could go back just for a second, though, we were talking about how well he knew the area and how well he'd prepared for the crime. The unfortunate thing is that I don't think it would take long to do a reconnaissance mission to map where you wanted the crime to take place and what your escape route would be afterwards. Yeah.
He knew the basics of the area, but he certainly didn't know it completely, because if you think about it, when he went up Cherry, he could have gone straight through the gap in the wall at the top of Cherry, and he could have done the same at Maple, but he didn't, because at night you can't see there's an exit route through there. So the first exit route he took was Spruce Street, which is obvious because there's a big thoroughfare into the park there. If he was absolutely really familiar with that location and not just vaguely familiar, he could have exited into the park much earlier than he actually did.
Well, there's a question about whether he heard a kid yelling his head off a block behind him, and the cops arriving. That may have factored in his decision to turn. But one thing that I don't think, even if he lived there, if he knew this like the back of his hand, I don't think he could have anticipated that there'd be a police response time within like 3 minutes.
No.
But if kids were yelling at the back and he'd turn right onto Jackson, he's exposed for at least 2 minutes, isn't he?
Yeah.
I guess you're right. It actually would have been a quicker exit if he had just kept straight.
It would have been probably easier if he would have Stine drive somewhere on Jackson Street. You know, it spares him the walk, etc. So I wonder why he didn't prefer Jackson Street as a place to commit the crime. That is kind of odd to me. I mean, I'm just asking myself.
It's true, because that's exactly where anyone would go, and he would know that the cops would know that they'd be going to the park, especially if it was on Jackson. So maybe by putting it a block over, he was saying, okay, you got to canvas 360 because you can't guarantee.
And his original intention, I believe, was probably Washington and Maple, and there's hardly any residences at that intersection. That's maybe why he never told the cab to go onto Jackson, because there's many residences overlooking a parked cab if you're going to shoot somebody at that location. So you've got much more chance of being identified than at the intersection of Washington and Maple.
Yeah, we're also taking Falk's word that there wasn't, in his recollection that there wasn't a car parked on Maple that he got into 30 seconds after Falcon's Elms left.
Yeah. I just want to delve into this car thing a bit. You know, one thought I have, is why is he not driving with his own car in the Presidio looking for someone on the street and then, didn't that person, So I think about, technically or in terms of the modus operandi. So instead of driving around with your car and finding the victim, which is what he does in his previous three crimes, in the Presidio, he probably knows he can't operate in that way. So what is the surest way to find a victim in the Presidio without driving around the car? You get on a cab and you get your victim where you want it, and you are inside the car. You don't have to get out or shoot someone from outside the car, etc. So it's the safest way actually to get a victim where you want to get it, and you're inside the car. So it's kind of, if you have a single shot, it will probably, the car will, how do you call that? It will dampen the sound, some sort of a silencer, basically. So I think that this is also a significant change in MO when you think about it. Yeah, the whole thing is differently planned. It's not like I'm jumping on my car and I'm, hunting for people in an isolated spot. He knows he's in Presidio. He knows there will be houses around. He knows there will be people awake at night. He knows probably his chance to find someone on the street is maybe, it's not guaranteed, but when you get a cab, your victim is already on your left side. You just drive them somewhere that is probably significant for you. Maybe symbolically a place where he lived before. Maybe he tries to give a message to someone. It could be, but also it's probably he drives the victim to a place where he can then quickly exit the scene. And I think that is something that is different in this crime as well. That he finds the victim somewhere else, and it's a victim that can basically drive him to where he wants that victim to be killed, and then he does it. So I see this difference also in the Presidio attack.
You know why, also? You want to know why?
Yeah.
Because Gareth Penn was right. Gareth Penn was right about everything. It's about lining up the angles on the map to get the radian going. It's about, you can't just, as you said, drive your own car there and just sit around for 2 hours waiting for somebody to come to the specific point. You had to have the taxi come there. All right, that's satire. Something that Gareth Penn said also in Time 17 that might be a little bit more serious. We look at the Zodiac killer's connection to automobiles. In the confirmed attacks, and even a lot of the unconfirmed ones, a key commonality is the automobile connection. At Lake Herman Road, the victims are in the car. Blue Rock Springs are in the car. at Lake Berryessa, he wrote the message on a car when he didn't have to. So what he progresses to at Presidio Heights is now he's inside the victim's
Inside
car.
the car, yeah.
And it's like it's an escalating form of power play. And there are a couple of reasons why Gareth Penn says this, which we don't have to elaborate too much on. He would also say the Zodiac murdered Joan Webster in 1981, and he was actually driving the victim to the location. I don't really entertain that theory. But, I mean, if you look at what he said up to 1969, I mean, maybe there's a little bit of truth to something like that this is somebody in his own mind, maybe even unconsciously escalating the power dynamic.
Yeah. Yeah, it's possible. This is also a valid angle of interpretation, of course.
Pure interpretation. I mean, it's as Richard said, we're using theories at this point.
There were plenty of places in San Francisco and elsewhere he could have committed a far easier crime. Silently, he could have committed a crime in the Presidio Park.
Yes.
So clearly. I think this crime was by design. I mean, he could have stuck with secluded areas in the middle of nowhere. Yeah. So I don't think you'd opt to choose the Stine murder as an easy option. You're doing it for purpose.
Yeah, and I think it's the only crime that has the letter already in mind. It's like, which is different again from the previous ones. He commits crime at Lake Harmon, then at Blue Rock Springs, and it takes him, like a month, and it doesn't look like the crimes were designed to arrive at the letter, basically. But in the Stine murder, the letter is the crime and the letter, they are so interwoven. Kill, write the letter, send it the next day, and the shirt goes into the letter, and something from the crime scene goes into the letter. So I think here crime and letter are part of the same design as you say it. But in the previous ones, I don't see that kind of a connection between the crimes and the letters. Again, something that strikes me different in the Stine, as different in the Stine murder, that the design aspect, the design aspect is much more emphasized here. You can see it, clearly.
The last two crimes, Berryessa and Presidio, the communication with the public or the police was immediate in both instances.
Yeah.
The car door was instant communication, and the Presidio Heights communication was 2 days later.
Yes, but about Blue Rock Springs, we have the phone call.
Yeah, but I take it different from the written communication. In my interpretation, the car door is not really a letter. It's still part of the ongoing crime. It's something new added to his modus operandi. He basically puts an executioner's logbook on the door of the victim and reminding us of all the former crimes. So this is more like, I don't know, leaving a little memorandum behind, on a crime scene. Yeah. So I don't really see it as a letter. And for me, Lake Berryessa is a crime that's forgotten or ignored in terms of letters, in terms of bragging about it, so it's something where he has evolved within his modus operandi. The call is something we know. The script on the door is new. The costume, etc., is totally new. So there is some sort of a very strange escalation, or in the way he makes his fantasy visible for the first time, I would say. That is really striking. But then I think LBS after that, after he finds out the next day that both of the people survived, he goes, in my opinion, he goes totally in a silent mode about LBS, and he skips it. He goes directly to Presidio, and so that's my interpretation about what I think about the door inscription, etc. I don't see it as a form of a letter. I merely see it as an addition to his MO during a crime. But that's me. I mean, not everyone would agree with it.
He just flips the script when he goes to Presidio Heights. At Lake Berryetta, he takes his writing to the crime scene, and at Presidio Heights, he takes the crime scene to his writing. So he's just flipped the script.
Yep.
Yeah. That's also a nice interpretation, I think.
Tell them
Flips a lot
about.
of-
Tell everyone, Druzer, about the Zodiac call on October the 15th.
Yeah. So the police received the letter on the 13th, and they write about it on the 15th, but they don't mention the. They don't panic the public by mentioning the threat to school children. And as soon as that paper would have hit the stands, the school in Santa Rosa received a bus bomb threat. So Zodiac had not mentioned a bomb at that point, and the public was not aware of any threat towards children at that point. So unless there was a mistake in the reporting or a very big coincidence, that was likely a pissed off Zodiac who wanted his horrific threat out there.
What I find funny about that is that bus bomb threat on school kids on October the 15th, before that information was released on the 16th and 17th. And as you said, that was a month before he ever threatened anybody with bombs. But that information about that phone call on October the 15th wasn't mentioned until October the 21st, which is why I find the only person ever targeted by a sniper, or a school bus ever targeted by a sniper, happened to be in Santa Rosa as well.
Indeed, right.
On the 17th of October, a woman reported somebody shooting at the school bus when she was taking kids to Yalupa Elementary School. That was Santa Rosa Yalupa Elementary School. And that's quite amazing that coincides with the Santa Rosa threat on the 15th that wasn't released.
Absolutely. I mean, these observations have been out in the community for several years, and for some reason they really haven't garnered much traction. But I'm not sure what the argument is. I guess the report on the 21st could have said Wednesday when it was actually Friday.
Yeah, it was Wednesday, it said, didn't it? Which was the 15th. But it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if it's the 15th or the 16th. It's still a month before Zodiac ever released anything about bombing school buses.
And it was on the day, like the shot that the Santa Rosa bus driver and an entire busload full of kids who shouldn't be ignored because of their youth. They thought they heard a shot, and that was actually, what day was that?
That was October the 17th. So that would have been.
So it was the threat had gotten out at that point then.
No, because the threat on the 15th wasn't released in the papers till the 21st. So the October the 17th shooting wasn't public. So it was amazing that it was Santa Rosa, the same as the call on the 15th.
Well, no, but the 17th they put out the threat that was in the letter, and then on that same day, Santa Rosa presumably had someone shooting at the bus, right? So someone could have read the Zodiac threat.
The phone call on the 15th threatening a Santa Rosa bus
That hadn't been released.
that hadn't been released.
But the Zodiac threat had been released.
Yes, by the time the 17th came along, but that wasn't about Santa Rosa, the Zodiac's letter, was it?
No, I mean, it strongly implies a San Francisco school bus at that point. A month later, it would be more broadened to the Bay Area, but it certainly didn't mention Santa Rosa.
But
so technically, a hoaxer could have read in the news that Zodiac had threatened bus drivers, a San Francisco one,
yeah,
and then took it upon themselves to make insanely took it upon themselves to make an attempt on a Santa Rosa bus, but that would just make it all a huge coincidence.
Yes,
I would bet significant dough that it was Zodiac who called Santa Rosa.
Yes, if a hoaxer read the details of the letter and thought, I'm going to target a bus, it's amazing that he picked Santa Rosa, where a bus bomb threat on Santa Rosa happened 2 days earlier, which wasn't released.
Maybe he had a hard time finding a bus in San Francisco.
Yeah.
No, guys, I mean, I don't mean to shift gears majorly. There's just something that I'm drawing a mental blank on. In the 2007 documentary where Donald Falk appears, there's a famous part where he changes his story from 1969 and he modifies something about his last sighting of the Zodiac. Do you guys remember the specifics of that?
Yes, and it wasn't the first time he had mentioned this deviation. The first deviation came in the 80s after Graysmith's book, which sort of, for the mass public, sort of outed what actually happened on the night. He said, okay, I'll start at the beginning. In the memo he wrote in November after the Zodiac's letter, he wrote that the white male adult was last seen going north on Maple. 10, 15 years later, when he speaks up again, he said he did not see him going down Maple. He, in fact, last saw him approaching a residence. And he was basically out of sight by the time that the description was changed over the radio. And at that point, Falk knew that had he gone back to the spot on Maple where he last saw him, the suspect would have definitely enough time to make it half a block into the Presidio via Maple. Therefore, he makes the decision to continue on up to Arguello, which is the route you have to take if you want to drive around to West Pacific on the other side of the wall, which is where he anticipated the suspect would be going. When he gets there, he doesn't find a suspect and presumably no suspicious cars.
Okay, that's really, I mean, because that's kind of what I was saying. The way that I would have worded it was that he first saw somebody, as you said, going up Maple, but then he changed it to say that he saw somebody going to the houses. But I felt that that wasn't specific enough, and I guess you clarified everything there. But somebody asked something in the chat about how, I'm trying to find the exact comment when they said, did they ever just canvass the people who are in the surrounding areas about just kind of looking at them even as suspects? Or, I mean, the reason why is to actually say something, good about Real Zodiac Killer Revealed, run by Adam Ivester. He says all right, he has a suspect named John Parr Cox who lived in the area. And he's like, even if his suspect gets completely debunked, what people should do is they should start going down the list of the other people who lived in the vicinity of Presidio Heights, because Officer Falk saw the suspect walking toward the houses. And that's what I really would like to hear from you guys. Do you agree or disagree with that type of thinking? Nothing. All right. Next question.
Sorry.
No,
No,
nobody. Richard.
no. The only thing I would say is if we assume he moved from Vallejo and was living in San Francisco at the time, there's good reason for him to be on foot, I think, rather than in a car. And if we can, I mean, there's a good reason that Mike Morford thinks that he lived around that payphone because of that delayed time. And I've just pointed out a good reason why he could have been living in the Marina District with the proximity to Donna Lass, and hence his later threat. So these two circumstances could easily put a killer on foot looking for going back to his residence after the Paul Stine murder. I don't know if that's what you asked, Ned.
Yes. Just like does Officer Falk's story indicate that the Zodiac was most likely a residence in the vicinity of the Stine murder?
I think it's absurd. I
Say,
can't.
Somebody else. All right, Druzer, let's hear it.
Well, I don't know. I respect the research of Mike Rodelli. I just feel I come to the opposite conclusions, and I suppose the same with Adam Ivesters. I guess my biggest bias in this case, I don't really have a theory, but the closest thing to a theory I have is that Zodiac's confidence every step of the way can be explained by him living at least a town away. He doesn't seem all that worried about leaving victims alive, being cited at crime scenes. You'd think he'd wear gloves, but I guess not. He sends them dozens of pages of his handwriting. Yeah, I don't know.
Think about Dennis Rader. One of his last victims was only a few doors down from where he lived.
Yeah.
It's possible. I certainly entertain all theories, and I don't claim that I'm right. It's just my impression is that so much of the narrative makes sense if Zodiac isn't worried about being seen by someone in his own town.
So, Druzer, it sounds like you're saying that the Zodiac was following the rule of you don't shit where you eat.
Yes, well put, Ned.
Yeah, he got more confident as he's crying. I think he left a buffer zone in his first two crimes, but equally he was inexperienced, I think, and wanted to get home fairly quickly, but not too close, obviously. So he left a short buffer zone, 5 or 6 miles, maybe from his residence. Then Berryessa, like I said, on a Saturday, it gives him more time. He travels further afield, and he travels a fair distance, 40 odd miles to San Francisco, and commits a crime there. So these all suggest to me that his centralized anchor point is a fair distance away from San Francisco. Plus what Kim Rossmo said, he can control where the crime occurs by choosing a taxi driver, which you'd only do in certain area that you aren't familiar with. So I'm with Mike Morford. I think there's an 80-90% chance that killer lives at about a mile radius around that payphone at Blue Rock Springs.
I can see the theory. I mean, it sort of goes either he did live in the Vallejo area, and that would explain a lot. And then once he started to get attention, he started to divert their gaze north, and then towards San Francisco, and he doesn't write to Vallejo anymore. He tries to push the investigation away. A slightly different way to look at it is we know that he's commuting to at least 2 of the crimes. So maybe he was a commuter from the beginning.
Well, here's something we have to address from Cat Daddy Steve in the chat when he says, did or does Presidio Heights and the homes have some narrow walkways between the homes? Think about places for fire hose firefighting purposes. And some people in the chat are saying, yes, that they've examined this on Google Maps. And Cheryl says she pulled it up on Google Earth, actually. And I mean, that could explain a lot about how the Zodiac might be seen walking toward the houses, but he's not actually entering a house if he's going through some type of walkway or passage, alleyway, some type of in-between, even a small space between the building, other alcoves. There's a wall with a drop to the road behind. Maple has a shorter drop. There's parking on the road with easy access to the Golden Gate Bridge. All right, so I mean, this could be an explanation as to why it might appear that the Zodiac was going into a house, but he's actually doing something else.
That's if you believe Donald Fouke.
Richard, the short answer to that is no. But that means I don't know which parts to believe, like which version of the story is true, which elements of the story are true. His witness description is a little bit different than the witness descriptions from other people, even different than the Robbins kids. Do I trust Donald Fouke? Did he get a better look at quote-unquote person X, or did the Robbins kids or Mike Michaud? It's like, which parts of Donald Fouke's story are incorrect?
Well, I think the part about pleated pants is correct.
All right. Well,
it's a lucky guess because that's what Brian had said 2 weeks earlier.
He said he last saw him heading up Maple, and then he said he last saw him going up some stairs. Didn't get to the top of the stairs, but those two places are at least 100 feet apart, and he couldn't have seen both as he drove away because he'd have been well into the distance by the time Zodiac went up the stairs, came down the stairs, and then walked to Maple. And went up Maple. That's impossible. And I think if you've got two contradicting stories, you have to question his testimony big time.
Okay, though, about that. If that happened years later in the 1980s when he first reversed this story, I mean, I don't remember what I had for breakfast. People can get confused and they can start, like, no, that's not what happened. This is what happened. But they genuinely make mistakes. And, to Fouke's, not credit, but like discredit, he didn't write this stuff down until what? How many days later? 29, 30, 31 days later or something like that?
Well, he didn't submit it for over a month. But I imagining that he knows on the night that this is a suspicious character that got by him. I don't have any problem believing that he took notes on the evening.
Probably he shares it earlier because what he writes in his memorandum, it already appears in the second sketch, the updated sketch of the Zodiac killer. In the first one, I think his age is given like between 25 and 30, etc. But in the second sketch, it looks like they use Fouke's description rather than that of the kids. So probably he tells about his encounter, but it's kept inside the police, let's say. But when the letter comes from Zodiac and he talks about the encounter, then probably Fouke is forced to write something about it. I don't know. I'm just speculating.
Well, Donald Fouke's description was the same as the kids. The kids on the morning after the crime said early 40s, and Donald Fouke said 35 to 45. So that's identical. That 25 to 30 thing that was placed on the sketch didn't come
from the other cab murder. It comes from that one, you say?
More than likely, I think the police put that there because they believed it was somehow connected to previous crimes.
Connected, yeah. I tend to think that it's the description that the kids gave them, and so that was credited first, and then they gave more credibility to Fouke. That's what I thought, but I might be wrong about it. So there is something else I want to say about this familiarity with the crime location. So we kind of tend to think that this person must be related with all these four locations, let's say at around the time the murders occurred. So he's someone who is in, let's say, in Vallejo or Benicia in 68, 69, or that he is probably someone who works in San Francisco and knows the Presidio because of that, or that he's, I don't know, goes fishing sometimes to Napa and knows a place like that. But maybe the experience or the knowledge about these places does not come from the same time, you know. Maybe he knows the Presidio rather good because it's, let's say, where he grew up, and probably not changing so much in, let's say, if he was 15 or so living there, and let's say he's 30 when he commits the crimes. In 10, 15 years, I don't think the overall pattern of that district would change. So maybe his experience and knowledge about these locations, it comes from different times. Because what I think here is that, you know, we usually say, okay, the killer commits his crimes in places that are not so far away from his house, and then we draw a big radius around it, but to find, you know, to specify a certain geographic center where he could be. But what if that does not really reflect how he got these places to know? Maybe he got the Presidio to know in his earlier life, then somehow winded up in Vallejo and Benicia. Maybe he planned to live in Napa County and started to build a place for himself, etc. So his acquaintance with these places, historically it could be built on something different. So think about like this: this guy kills in proximity, but maybe in places that he knows from different times. So technically, killing in Presidio would be an area that he used to live in. So he's actually killing in the comfort zone of what he knows as the Presidio, and then he kills again within a radius of his center in Napa, wherever his headquarters is, you know. So it could be that instead of talking about one location from which all these murder places should be seen from, maybe it's all these locations, but each one has a center at which he used to live or had a connection with.
Yeah.
I'm sorry if I can't explain very well. It's where my English gets a bit.
That's excellent. I mean, it works with my theory that he couldn't be connected contemporarily with any of these connections, with any of these locations, but he did have some awareness of them. There's a couple of there's several suspects that would fit into that category. I don't think it's quite necessary that he had to have familiarity with any of these locations. I'm pretty sure that Lake Herman Road was not a location that he anticipated. But perhaps Blue Rock Springs would be a place where he knew that couples might be on the 4th of July, maybe. But the third and fourth crimes, I think the location was chosen, at least approximately, you know, like somewhere at Lake Berryessa, and then probably very specifically in Presidio Heights.
He made a costume specifically for the Lake Berryessa attack, so he probably had conceived an area he wanted to commit that. And don't forget, he made the phone call 27 miles away from that lake. he was heading in the direction of Vallejo, whether you believe he lived there or not. Now, if he lived somewhere in Napa or Vallejo, he chose somewhere 40 odd miles away. He could have killed anywhere in between. There were plenty of remote locations between Vallejo and Lake Berryessa. He deliberately went 40 miles with a costume to commit this crime. So it's undoubtedly he was familiar with this area.
Maybe he had a development there, just somewhere in that area. I think there were developments in that area. Individual people buying land there and setting up a hut or something like that. So it could be possible that he was at something there. I mean, I'm just again theorizing or bringing up hypothesis. It's not theory, actually.
He knew about park headquarters. Whether or not he got the distance slightly wrong, he knew about park headquarters for a start.
Yeah.
Yes.
So to me also it looks like it's someone who knows the area, not only from visiting probably, but maybe doing something more permanently there, or spending several weekends there, having time to observe what's going on there, etc. Not that he's specifically observing for the kill, but probably he has an idea what's going on in the area, when people start to leave. Maybe saw couples previously, doing that necking thing somewhere on these spots at the shore. So yes, I mean, to me, it looks like there is some sort of familiarity, and historically, at least, he probably has something to do with these areas, not contemporary or simultaneously, as Druzer said, but probably there have been periods in his lives where he had some past with these regions. I would, because when you think about, someone wants to do the crime mostly somewhere where they feel kind of comfortable, so yeah, maybe all these 4 zones, these areas are comfortable to him for some reason, for the experience he had with these places earlier.
You mitigate the risk, don't you? You mitigate the risk when you commit a crime in an area that you are somewhat familiar with, rather than somewhere completely strange to you. The same reason that killers bury the bodies somewhere they've had experience with, where they know they're not going to be overlooked while they're burying a body or disposing of it. So it makes sense to be familiar with the area that you're committing the crime in to some extent, but you obviously don't do it right on your doorstep.
Yeah. So kind of a buffer. Maybe he has at that time something in Napa going on, and more invested with his life in that part. And maybe the choice of Presidio is, it's again a place he knows somehow. But it's always a bit confusing because we have so many letters from San Francisco. Does it indicate that he is somehow strongly involved with San Francisco, or does it mean he chooses San Francisco because it helps him to stay more anonymous, because San Francisco is a very big place, but if he would send letters from, I don't know, Pleasanton or some other places, maybe it would give more, it would alert, let's say, geographic profilers maybe more to the place where he lives, but San Francisco is like how many people live there? 1 million, and you have so many post boxes where you can put the letters in. So it's hard to say, does he really work there, or does he go the extra mile to shield himself from associations with a certain county? So that, for example, is a problem in my view, and there's not much to do about it because we would need more evidence. But that's what we have to make our point.
Geographic profilers call it a target backcloth.
Mm.
They know the area somewhat, the exit routes, the entry routes,
Yeah.
possible eyewitnesses, and this is the target backcloth of the area you're targeting somebody. It's only common sense. If I was committing a crime, I wouldn't turn up into a random village and start killing people. I'd want to have had some experience, whether it be 5, 10, 15, 20 years ago, of somewhere I've worked, lived, visited. It's common sense that this person has probably been there before.
Yeah.
It's different evaluating these cities. Like, I feel that he didn't live in Vallejo because it's a small town, and if someone saw him there, that would be a problem. I'd extend that to Napa and certainly Benicia, but we can't rule out that one could say that the simplest answer is that he lived in San Francisco and knew that it was big enough that he's not going to be recognized. No one, it doesn't matter whether they know what kind of car he drove. They're not going to get very far.
No.
Do you think he took the taxi cab to that location because he was familiar with it?
I think he was familiar with. Sorry, I think he was.
Intensely.
I think he'd been there. He knew what he was going to do that night. I think if he lived or worked nearby, then it would be a risk he wouldn't take.
And I think I would turn to somebody named Druzer, who said it very well, that he wouldn't have needed that much to learn about the area. We're talking about looking at a map once or twice, maybe visiting once or twice. All right, here's what I'm going to do. It doesn't necessarily mean that he is a lifelong resident of that neighborhood, or that it's, he's been there like a bazillion times or anything. This could be planned very easily, but still a little bit of planning.
True. Yeah, it's really excellent. All these theories, hypotheses, excellent. Guys, are you okay to take some question in the chat, because I see there is a million of questions?
Yeah. Yeah, far away.
Yes, Jerome. I have a requested topic that somebody sent to us via email for this panel discussion show on Paul Stine. You want to do a few from the chat first?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then we can do that.
Far away.
Okay. And you send me that on my email?
Oh no, I can just read it off. I thought you were going to do the questions from the chat first. Then I'll do this.
No. I was saying the.
Oh, you want the request?
Received, yeah, the request you have received.
All right, giving a shout out to Scott H, who sent this to my email address, blackboxonlineradio@aol.com. And he says, I have something for the next Zodiac Killer panel show. Here is a challenge question to the best of my knowledge that has not been brought up before. Is it possible that the Zodiac Killer intentionally left fingerprints on the taxicab in Presidio Heights to leave a kind of criminal copyright? My reasoning is as follows. Many of the Zodiac community have been rightly confounded by the seemingly bizarre carelessness of the Zodiac Killer and his last canonical murder. How could this by now experienced killer neglect to wear gloves when doing so would have been so easy? I now believe that this is a very intentional killer and he intended to leave fingerprints at the crime scene. Why would he do such a thing? We know that the Zodiac took pains from the beginning to prove that he was behind the crimes he committed. He wanted to take credit for it while remaining anonymous to avoid the prison sentence and the death penalty. If the Zodiac had ever wanted to be caught, he never would have written so many letters. Every letter he sent risked the mistake of being caught. Therefore, from the beginning, the Zodiac was playing a quote-unquote dangerous game with the police, a game that was always risking being discovered, and yet he kept playing for a long time. Why would he do such a thing? And if this was the Zodiac's plan, did it work?
Excellent question.
Yes, thank you.
if Zodiac was worried about any of this stuff, he wouldn't have sent the letters. Like he entered into this game.
And
I
he
think the
claimed,
question was, though, did the Zodiac want to leave a fingerprint to intentionally get caught at some point?
I don't
Well, he
think that he
claimed
would
he
have wiped. Sorry, I don't think he would have wiped the cab down if he was if he wanted to leave prints. If he was intentionally leaving prints, I don't know how he would go about that in 30 seconds without I mean, if he had like pulled out some like Scotch tape, like, placing them around. That's not exactly what was viewed, though.
and he claimed he wore airplane cement on his fingers. Whether that's true or not, but I don't think he was that stupid that he would deliberately put fingerprints on the cab. I think the bloody fingerprint was probably by accident.
We got to wait for Vincent to get back because he's the only one I know who's actually gone to the effort of getting this glue and putting it on his fingers, and
Yeah.
That's totally
I don't know.
right.
I'd like to hear about his experiment there.
I wanted to do it at some point, but that was about 2 years ago when I thought about trying it out. But Vincent actually went through with it. Props to him. Now, I understand what Scott is saying in the question because some serial killers want to get caught eventually. They set themselves up for failure. And as Ed brought up when he was on the panel just today, maybe the Zodiac wasn't trying to wipe down the cab to clear fingerprints. He could have actually been trying to get some droplets of blood from Paul Stine's shirt so it was blood-stained. And, I appreciate the different types of thinking. In the past, I've always maintained the position that I think the Zodiac did not want to get caught. Yes, do the thrilling experience. Yes, almost get caught, but not quite. Because, he's putting all this info in the letters. He is mailing in pieces of physical evidence. He wants people to know that the Zodiac is committing these crimes, but I think that if he wanted to get caught, he could have done that so much more easily. Look at somebody like David Berkowitz getting a parking ticket at the wrong place on purpose. There could have been other ways to do this, but that's just my take on the subject.
Okay. Anybody else?
To me, it's unlikely that he would do that intentionally. I don't see enough context in general, what we know about the crime to somehow justify that he could have done it on purpose. So maybe if there's other evidence or knowledge, maybe we could support this hypothesis. But to me, it seems unlikely. And you could have a lot of different speculations at that point, like what if he had fingers with him that he stole from a grave or something and used them, to leave prints. I don't know. And it opens an area of speculation where we probably get lost. And so I don't know. I don't really follow this thing.
I think the crimes were the secondary driver. His main interest was sending communications into the newspapers. I think if he'd got caught, that avenue of pleasure would have been taken away from him.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
He doesn't want to do it under his real name. He wants to do this under the name the Zodiac.
No.
And you have all this effort to kind of shift the investigation to something else, and then also with all that effort you want yourself to be caught, and it makes no sense. It doesn't really fit with the overall goal that we see in the whole attempt of what we call the Stine murder. I don't know. I don't buy it.
No, if he wanted to get caught, he'd just stayed in the cab.
Yeah.
So I can't see any. I can't see. Most killers don't want to get caught. They might tempt fate a little bit more as they go along, but that doesn't mean they're deliberately trying to get caught.
Yeah,
I see something possible, but yeah, it's unlikely. But let's say it's possible. Let's say Zodiac knew it was his last crime, and for him, it was his masterpiece, and that's why, for the first time, and the last time, he changed his MO, took something from the scene like Jack the Ripper, because he knew it was his last crime. Maybe because it was his first date. Maybe with Donalas. I don't know. I'm just guessing something like this. Maybe he was in contact with Donalas because do we know, Richard, how many times after the Polstein killing Donalas moved?
Yeah, she moved on June the 5th, I think it was,
Okay,
1970.
okay.
But if he
Maybe,
wanted to commit, if this was his last crime and he wanted this to be his last crime, he wouldn't go threatening to commit more crimes on November the 9th in the bus bomb letter.
yeah, but I think it is just my opinion. I think the bus bomb letter was a distraction. It was a complete distraction
I
for
do
the
too.
media. Yeah, I think there were never buzz bomb, never. I think it was a lie again because we know the Zodiac is a liar, but we don't know when he say the truth or when he's lying. So this is why it's very difficult to understand the guy, but we know he is a liar. So that's it's possible that all this communication after his last crime was just BS.
Yes.
I think up to the Stine murder, at the very least, I think most of the stuff he told us was true. Because all
Yeah,
those crimes, all the letters were trying to do were prove he was the killer and
I
prove where
agree.
he went. I don't think I can't think of any lies in the first one, two, three, four, first five letters. I think that was all about proof. I don't remember any lies in any of them. There may have been
No,
Oh, yes,
boasting.
I
I
do.
agree.
There may have
I
been
agree.
boasting, but boasting isn't lies.
Yeah, empty threat doesn't exactly count as a lie.
No, no,
Richard, like to give
putting
you
that
what I honestly think about
empty
what
threat.
happened like after the Stein murder, this might be one of the few points where I agree with Richard Walter, where he goes out. He doesn't necessarily know that it's his final crime, but number one, he comes very close to getting caught. Number two, he has proven that he can commit the murders and get caught, and even eventually commit the murders, not get caught, and mail in a trophy or some type of signature item. So he's already proven to himself that he can do all of these things. He has no more need to commit thrill kills. It's not going to be exhilarating anymore because he's done the hooded executioner. He's committed a crime and walked past police officers. Now he focuses on the letters. All right, I get that, but that wouldn't mean that he's not going to stop making threats. I kind of side with Jerome when I think, why would the Zodiac write this in the letter? I'm going to disguise my crimes as routine robberies and accidents. That, I think, was a lie. I think that he's just trying to scare people, continue the
Yeah,
image of terror. And the thing that I really wanted to get your thoughts on, Richard, is what would you make of the 340 cipher when it says, I now have enough slaves to work for me?
exactly.
Doesn't that suggest that he's not going to commit more murders?
Uh, well, you could interpret it as it's misleading. It doesn't. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah.
Didn't that contradict with the with the bus bomb letter the very following day?
Oh, about how he's going to threaten to kill more people?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
he's
Absolutely.
Yeah, it was a joke, and until they
Yeah.
decoded his almost impossible cipher, he was going to keep up the ruse.
Yeah, but which one was the ruse or the joke?
That he
Well,
was going to keep doing it.
Cipher.
I think
I'm
that,
gonna-
that, that indicates what you said, Jerome, that the Zodiac is inconsistent. He is indeed a liar on some points. Now, we don't know which
Yeah,
ones.
in some
Maybe
points,
he
yeah.
did commit murders. Maybe he did murder Donald Lass. That's entirely possible. And
Yeah.
maybe he never killed again. As Jerome said, we simply do not know because some is a truth and some is a lie.
Mhm. But technically, when you announce that from now on my crimes could look as like anything, and I might look like anything in any crime, it opens such a space for you to create speculation. You can basically start to say, I killed this person. Uh, you couldn't, relate me to it. I looked like this in that crime, and I told you I will look differently. So I think it's kind of a move where he creates a lever for himself
Yeah,
where he can
create
basically
a
claim
plan.
every crime out there, and he doesn't need to do it, but it helps him to hold his image up. It helps him to create confusion, speculation. Maybe it helps him to divide resources that LE has. So they have to look into everything. So he can play whatever game he wants, and that's the lever that he creates for himself. Once he says, "I might do anything, and I might look like anything." So that, Yani, I don't know. I wouldn't call it a lie, but I think it's a manipulation. Eventually, it's some sort of a manipulation that he's doing there. That's how I see it.
For me,
And
what
then
I see. Oh, excuse me, Richard.
no, carry on.
For me, what I see, it's he want to create a boogeyman, and he
Mm,
will continue for 3 years. And after these 3 years, he will go to kill by himself this boogeyman. And that's why we see this descent in this letter, this level of threat uh, goes down 3 years after, because I think he had killed by himself his own boogeyman that he created. That's my observation, but
mm.
can be wrong.
And
Can be wrong.
apparently, it works somehow because it's like 50 years now, and we're still
Yeah.
discussing, and no one is really sure, did he do this, did he do that, and it creates so much um, conflicting opinions among Sloyds, the researchers. So think what it causes with police, with people who have to really do the research, confirm, go to talk to witnesses, etc., etc. So it's kind of he creates for himself a space where he can basically dump inside everything that he wants if he wants to confuse police, detectives, etc. So that's primarily, in my opinion, the function of this announcement of change. It makes you uh, it turns you into some sort of a joker card. Before there is some sort of a value on the card that represents you. Let's say you are spades 8, but now you're joker. You could have done this. He can insert himself into any crime that he wants. If it floats his boat, if he needs a manipulation, he can basically come out. I did this, and I told you that I will be capable of doing this kind of a thing. So it gives him freedom to bullshit everyone, with his claims. And at that point, maybe we can start saying, okay, once he does this announcement, most of the things he says are the lies, manipulative things that he tries to do. So in that sense, maybe I can say that Jerome is right that after some point it's basically looks like lies. But it
Oh,
stays
and
as such also because we don't know, we don't have enough evidence to dispute it. We cannot say it's not a lie, it's true because we found this and this. So he creates this whole area of speculation in my opinion, and it serves him to disguise himself, basically.
Yeah, he creates confusion, and he's playing games. He said, "I'm going to commit routine robberies and accidents."
Yeah,
Disguised. And then he insinuates the murder of Richard Raditich. He insinuates the murder of Sherry Joe Bates. He insinuates the murder of Donna Lass. He's a contradiction. He's a walking contradiction.
Yeah, and he doesn't miss a chance. When in the press someone says, "Oh, this could be the Zodiac," he immediately, jumps in and says, "Yeah, I burned the lady's car.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you found out about my Riverside activity. Ah, yes, here's my Pines card. Okay, Donna Lass. Okay, so I think it's a bit this kind of behavior that he enables for himself once he announces, I could do anything. I could look like anyone. So that gives him the comfort of basically insinuating himself whenever he wants, whenever he feels needs or whatever.
But there's also crimes like Linda Christine Keynes, who was I think she was killed by Berryessa, was she? Buried there anyway, near Berryessa, 15 miles away. And that was linked to Zodiac. And yet a week after it appeared in the newspapers, he mentioned nothing about it in the Los Angeles letter. So a bit like the Zodiac movie back in 1971. It's obvious that he should have mentioned that and latched onto it, but he didn't. To me, the guy just doesn't follow any common sense or any rules. He just does what he wants, and that's basically it.
I think the question's been raised before. After the independent Zodiac film came out, they must have gotten a ton of letters from people purporting to be Zodiac.
That's true.
I mean, we're guessing, but I would suppose there would be tons of them, and what would differentiate them?
Yeah, one could have been Zodiac easily, couldn't it?
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, that's very important because everybody always asks me this. Why didn't the Zodiac make a public statement about the 1971 film? And full credit goes to Richard Grinnell. He's the first person that I heard say this. Well, maybe he did, and they just didn't, take it seriously. And Druzer just brought up a very good reason. They're getting too many letters in 1971 after that movie was made, or it's there could have been letters written in 72, 73 that were the Zodiac, and they're just being dismissed because of a different penmanship or something like that, or they don't think it's the way that he would write a letter. Who knows?
Yeah.
What was So I was just going to carry on, Druzer.
No, you go ahead.
No, all I was going to ask was, what's the next question on the Stine thing, rather than get off track a bit.
The next question, I don't know, because we were on Ned question after we were outside, so I don't know. Do we have any question? Yeah, I see there is
Of
a
course
lot
we
of
do. We have Ray Grant in the chat. Hey, Ray, how's it going? He says, Richard, you're wrong. The Eureka card references the 1971 film. I guess then the whole panel was wrong because we were mostly on par on the same page. But
obviously that could be disputed.
What's the exact reference to the 71 film and the Eureka card? I'm trying to think right now.
The Groucho glasses, perhaps. Yeah.
Groucho Marx.
That came with the card, though.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk about just how thoughtfully Zodiac was choosing his greeting cards, sometimes with very little time.
Well, that what Ray Grant says there is a theory. It's not. You can't prove it.
Absolutely.
No, it could be a
it's been 5 years since I've seen the 71 film, guys, so sorry if I'm blanking on the details.
Well, he certainly took his time with giving his response, if that's the case.
But in my opinion, the Eureka card is not legit, so
50-50 at best for me.
I mean, it might be, but as Druzer says, 19 years, right?
Yeah.
All right, but like Richard said, we can get some stuff from the chat if we want to go through some Stine questions.
Yeah.
Go on, what's the
Go
next one?
There is a lot. I'm going to start on the beginning or the middle. Yeah.
Ned, do you know if the police checked all parking tickets that were written that night around the vicinity? Why only me? I mean, this would be an excellent question for Druzer and Richard Grinnell. Now, as far as you mean the vicinity, like on Washington and Cherry, I mean, I don't. Druzer and Richard, do you know of any other parking tickets that were written on that street at that time? I mean, has that even come up? Like, if there was a parking ticket on that street, I can't recall a single thing about that. Now, did they check the vicinity? You know, like of like Washington and Maple Jackson Street? I do not know. Guys, do you have any?
I thought you'd have canvassed the neighbourhood to see if any strange cars were parked in the area that they didn't recognise. I thought that would have been routine police work, or knock on the residences to see if they noticed anything suspicious in the area at a certain time. I think that would have been routine. Whether they had any parking tickets that night, I just don't know.
I think Zodiac may have thought that they would canvass the area, all of the areas.
Of course.
One crime scene after another, but I don't think they did any of them. And if now they're in Presidio Heights, it's an upscale neighborhood. They probably don't want to bother a bunch of rich people. They think for days that it's just a routine robbery.
Yeah.
I don't think they made any such effort.
I would have thought as soon as the October the 13th letter arrived, they'd have gone out canvassing because of the gravity of the situation.
They should
When I
have.
watch these shows, that's what they do, right? The Zodiac loved, like true crime, and he loved like magazines and such that talk about these stories. I mean, they talk about this stuff all the time, on crime shows. That's the procedure, right? Canvassing the area. So I'd be very surprised if they didn't, right?
Right.
Well, it'd be stupid, wouldn't it, if they didn't? Especially, I mean, they'd had
Yeah.
five murders up to this point, and you need to capture the killer. So to just say, "Oh, forget about it, we won't canvass the area to see if they've seen anything in the area immediately after the crime," would be ridiculous.
Well, then you have the child witness, whom we haven't talked about yet, the one that identified Xenophon Anthony on Jackson Street. How would they obtain his witness statement if they didn't canvass the area? Did he just come forward? I mean, 8 years old?
Well, yes, that may have been the case because the 3898 Washington Street, which overlooked the cab, the child that lived there was 8 years, I think, and 2 months old at the time. So my guess is that is the child that observed part of the crime. So we may have had 4 eyewitnesses overlooking that cab at the time, not 3. I mean, it's a fair bet. An 8-year-old living at the address overlooking the cab. But that brings into question, did the killer look like Xenophon Anthony?
Oh, no, my question was, did they obtain that witness statement by canvassing the area? Do you think they did? I mean, he's 8 years old. Like,
well, they could. Well, yes. I mean, if they'd had the eyewitnesses from the opposite side of the road, I would have thought they'd have canvassed that side of the road. But I don't know for certain. No.
Could have just been a parent coming forward.
Yeah.
I have a question.
He says, and then they come forward because of the papers. I get you, but like I would expect that the police went door to door.
You give them a lot of credit. I mean, they didn't have to solve the crime. It's just that their job was to solve the crime. That's not the same thing. I don't think that they put in the kind of effort that they should have or would have had they known it was Zodiac at the time.
Yeah, they don't know it for the first 4 days. Sorry, continue, please.
Oh. Now, do you think the fact that Zodiac had missed to kill Michael Mageau and Brian Harnell leads to the crime of Paul Stine?
I can answer that one the best as I can. I think there is insufficient evidence to say that that's why Paul Stine was murdered. A lot of people bring this up. They're like, okay, the last 2 male victims survived, therefore he wanted to kill a man. And he wanted to prove that he could kill a man. Maybe, it's a defendable interpretation of the evidence, but I think there's insufficient evidence. I don't think that guarantees anything. As we said, look at these alternative possibilities. Number one, angles on a map, like what Gareth Penn has said, and Ray Grant, he's in the chat. We'll give him credit to that too. That's also, he talks about this. And then also it could just be that it had a specific location for him that had some meaning and significance. Number three, he wanted to do this for thrill. He thought it was more exhilarating. Number four, it might have actually been close to his home, like people like Mike Rodelli think about. And he had, again, this type of wanting to commit a crime in his backyard. You guys know that I don't endorse that theory, but I mean, people have put forward other possibilities that are so different than this thing about, no, he wanted to kill a man to prove that he could kill a man. So that's my subject.
I think he wanted to make sure that the victim died. He had 2 attacks in a row where he left a survivor. Technically 2 survivors at Lake Berryessa, who both spoke to police. So I think at that point he just wanted to make sure the job got done, sort of cut some of the theatrics.
And the papers did say that he targeted the women more, which he didn't, but the papers accused him of putting more effort into murdering the women. So maybe this was a reaction to it.
So then, I guess, Richard, do you think the Zodiac was specifically trying to murder a man for the sake of killing a male to prove that he could?
Yeah, like I said before, I think they were calling him a bit of a sex fiend after Lake Berryessa. They're accusing him of piquerism, getting sexual gratification from stabbing. They were saying he was weak, sort of thing. He couldn't kill the men, but he killed the women. He did overkill with Cecilia Shepherd, overkill with all the women victims. And I think he took offense to this and maybe thought, I'll teach them. I'll just select a single man. And that's maybe one of the main reasons why he targeted Paul Stine, along with the fact he'd get more publicity in the big city.
Yeah, he's not necessarily getting the same thing out of all of these crimes. His intentions can alter from one to the other. I know my brother's theory is that he just wanted them to suffer. He was hoping they'd die, but it wasn't the most important factor. He just wanted to poke some holes in these people.
But I actually agree with Ray Grant that I try not to psychologically profile the Zodiac killer and get inside the mind of the killer. I think a lot of that is just fantasy. Even people who sit down with them in interviews get duped by these people. So trying to profile this killer from a psychological aspect at distance through letters and crimes that we're remote to is practically impossible.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's practically impossible. I won't stop trying though.
No, it's interesting, but getting into the mind of a killer, I think, is a little bit of a fiction, and it's great for TV, but I just don't think it really stacks up in reality.
But it's also a bit of a fiction that you don't try. You go every step of the way trying to determine what he's reacting to. What is this a response to? Where is he honest? Where is he dishonest?
What did Gray Smith just say in the trailer for This Is the Zodiac Speaking? I'm not good at puzzles, but I don't give up.
Yeah.
I'm not going to make psychological profiles of somebody when we know very little about this person. I'm still going to do it.
Yeah, that's why we're interested in the case, is because it's so hard. It's so unknowable.
But one thing, Richard, I completely agree with you on is that, I think even John Douglas talked about this in some of his stuff when he says that when you're talking about a psychopathic serial killer, even when you're face to face with them and they're just telling you why they did it and what's going on, he's like, these people could always be lying. I mean, psychopaths are all about manipulation and, so to just even to just look at something about the footsteps that the guy was taking and his actions and behaviors on the nights of the crimes. Yeah, it's hard. I completely get you that it's going to be a little bit of, it's difficult.
I agree with Pat Brown I think people who try and get inside the mind of the killer and get all screwed up trying to chase this killer by delving into his brain shouldn't be in the profession. You have to stay remote from it and clinical. I think when you start getting into the mind of a killer and wrapping yourself all in knots, you're not thinking clearly. So,
and talking a lot about death in his letter, talking about slave in his afterlife. Do you think the Zodiac was somebody sick or had health problem?
no.
Jerome, Ray Grant has answered that question for us. No board-certified psychologist would attempt a diagnosis of a subject that he hasn't interviewed. So I guess that's what I have to say. I mean, and what Dr. Todd Grande says about this is when you're dealing with a real person, you're not diagnosing anyone, you're just speculating on what could happen. I don't think the Zodiac was sick in that sense. I think he was definitely sick in the mentally ill sense, but no, I don't think he had any type of delusional belief about slaves in the afterlife.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree.
No, this was a character he created. I think no matter who he was, we have to start with that premise.
Yeah. His persona, his personal boogeyman that he wanted that everybody being afraid of.
He was a calculated psychopath.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think one thing that makes it really difficult to analyze is I think there was some planning and some spontaneity, and some of it looks like a grand plan, and maybe it was, but I don't think so.
In Ray Grant's case, it's 4 psychopaths.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Yeah.
Anyway, what was the next question that we haven't got on to?
We have a lot.
We're doomed.
You can read it? Yeah.
Melissa says, Graysmith said he wrote the book with the hope that someone reading it would recognize the Zodiac if you knew him. I think that's partly true. As much as we all criticize Graysmith, he spent years and years before he published any book.
Yeah, 8 or 9 years, I think.
I heard he started the book in 1972 and it didn't come out till 86, so we're talking like 14 years. But yeah, Jerome would be right about it's like at least 9 years going to the possible publication of This is the Zodiac Speaking in 1981. Yeah. And that's what Thomas Horn likes to talk about. Like they were even printing the advertisements for the book that was supposed to come out with W.W. Norton. And for some reason, they pulled the publication of it, at the last second. And then Graysmith had to find a new publisher. And he went with St. Martin's Press, but he didn't get with them until 1986. Or to rephrase, the book didn't come out until 1986 with St. Martin's.
Yeah, the trouble is Graysmith wanted us to recognize the Zodiac as one person.
Druzer. Yeah.
Druzer, why this character, the character of the Zodiac? This is always the reason for why people make their choices. Yeah, I mean, whether the nuance of the character itself reflects on the real man, we have no idea. But we're pretty sure he didn't want to get caught. So there's probably nothing of identification value in there.
All right, though. I think I know what Melissa's going at. It's something that I entertained a lot in the past, especially in 2023, that what the Zodiac was doing was possibly taking influences from the Navy, from his time in the Navy, and then incorporating them into the persona. Number 1, the Zodiac boats that are used by the Navy. Number 2, Zodiac watches. Number 3, I mean, just like even Melissa brought up the Gallantry Cross as a naval medal that has almost an identical Zodiac symbol. And, 13 buttons on the naval uniform and so on. All of that, though, I have to admit, is speculation, interpretations of the evidence. And it's not like the Zodiac is writing all this out, that I was in the Navy on this ship or something like that. But I can definitely see the influences. I used to be all gung ho for that. I was even getting to the point where I thought that the Zodiac had done a tour of the Mediterranean, and he stopped at the naval base in Cadiz, Spain, the joint Spanish-American naval base, and I had to take a step back and be like, all right, these are just my interpretations. They're not certifiable.
The only window we've got into this killer is his communications, really, and I think we have to disseminate whether what is in the communications has been leaked there subconsciously or has been deliberately manufactured to send us down a particular route. And if we could identify what has been dropped into those letters subconsciously, we might get a little bit closer to the identity of the Zodiac killer. Not much, but a little bit.
Yeah. Read between the lines.
Yeah, and how cocky is he? Did he
Very.
actually have a basement and let it slip twice? Was that conscious?
Or unconscious.
I think he's talking about giving the cops busy work. He's claiming crimes that he's alluding to the claim of crimes that we know that he didn't commit. So it's hard to take his word for anything that might be helpful.
Yeah.
A bit like when I analysed the July the 31st letters using the present and the past tense when he refers to San Francisco and when he refers to Vallejo.
Yeah.
A bit like a criminal will mention somebody who's disappeared in the past tense. That sort of analysation of the letters.
That's as good as it gets, Richard.
That's as good as it gets. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wait, Richard, was your question, what is the Zodiac intentionally conveying in the letters and what could be subconscious slips?
Yeah, because if you look at the July the 31st letters, when he addresses the Vallejo Times Herald, first in those communications, he says, are being mailed, i.e. they're in the here and now. When he mentions San Francisco, he says they have been mailed. In other words, he associates San Francisco with a distant past. In other words, he has to travel all the way back to Vallejo. And I was trying to use the past and present tense to identify that he saw Vallejo in the here and now, outside his own window, if you will. And so he relates everything to Vallejo in the present tense and everything to San Francisco in the past tense. And that's what he did in his July letters.
Yeah,
this stuff is all spot on. I think that's a good point of investigation. Much as Druzer said, though, that's as good as it gets. What is the Zodiac trying to make us think? Number one, he has this belief system about killing people, being reborn in paradise, and he's going to have slaves. Number two, he is smart and more clever than other people. Number three, he is capable of many different types of crimes, not only murders with a gun or a knife, but the bomb, that could even be like by fire or something like that on his Halloween card and so on. Also taking credit for the Kathleen Johns incident. He's trying to make us think that he's a very diverse and capable criminal who can strike in different ways. He also wants us to think that he is very smart by the creation and composition of his ciphers. But that's extremely general. I think that would describe about, several hundred serial killers already, so it's like making threats.
Yeah.
He likes the most famous play that we can mention. He likes the most famous band we could mention.
Yeah.
He wants attention via Zodiac buttons. This is the stuff that he's saying, though. This is like what he is actually communicating to us. I think that just means he was a narcissist and he's an attention seeker.
In a way, he got his button when Paul Avery has received threat and everybody was wearing a button. I'm not Paul Avery. It's a way to say that the Zodiac had his button.
Yeah, I mean, when I was speaking about the July the 31st letters, Ned, that's why I went straight to the August the 4th letter. And in that, he says, in answer to you asking for more details about the good times I have had in Vallejo, rather than I had in Vallejo.
Yeah.
Had in Vallejo is more a finish. That's the end of it. I have had suggests something still ongoing, still a relationship with Vallejo. If you look up those tenses. So that backed up with the July letters suggested to me he was still connected to Vallejo in the present. because of that verb choice.
Speculative, obviously, but it's a coherent theory.
Absolutely.
Yes. And Richard,
Or
have you
future
seen?
Valero attack.
Sorry, what was that?
Oh, go ahead, Jerome.
No, go ahead, Ned. Go ahead.
I just said that could have been foreshadowing the next Vallejo attack. Or Napa County.
Quite possibly.
Can you ask it again, please? I missed it.
Oh, I didn't have a question, but Jerome has something.
Okay. So I thought it's a new question.
Yeah, I was wonder about something when he's talking about Riverside. He's talking about his activity in Riverside, but he said you have only find the easy one. I wonder if the police had made other connection with other murder than Cherry Joe Bates, because he's talking about Cherry Joe Bates, but he say that's what we believe, but he say you had only find the easy one, so that means there is more. And I wonder if the Riverside police had made some investigation to see if there were in this year or around this year or around this area similar crime or some stuff like this.
Whether he committed other
Yes.
crimes or not, he couldn't have. I don't think he knew what the police had or didn't have. I think he would have described the Riverside crime as an easy one because it had the same signature as the Zodiac crimes, writing to the police. So obviously that one would stand out.
Okay.
Yes,
And
investigate other crimes. Smith wrote about one in his book, The Attempted Abduction of a Riverside Co-ed who was not from RCC, but UC Riverside about 3 weeks later. And it was a failed abduction, but I mean, that's one that has been investigated. And also to answer Jerome's question, my interpretation of that statement was, you stumbled upon my Riverside activity, but you're only getting the easy ones. There are a hell of a lot more down there. That to me meant Southern California, not exclusively Riverside, just, okay, you found a crime in Southern California, which happened to be in Riverside. I've committed crimes in Southern California. It's open-ended. Ray Davis, Domingos Edwards, the Swindles, but Nikki Benedict and Poway. But, that's not like specific. That's just like how I interpreted it.
Yeah, Kathy and Snoozy, or Snoozy and Furlong would have been south as well. And he had inferred involvement in that crime, and they hadn't caught the real culprit.
there was also,
Sorry, go ahead, Richard.
I was going to say, there was also, I don't know if you just read it, Druzer, there was also an abduction of a woman just before the Sherry Joe Bates thing.
Yeah, for 2 hours, right?
Oh, just after. And I found recently that when they wrote about that in the newspapers, the exact same wording was used in that newspaper that the author used in the confession letter. In the newspapers on the 24th, it said that the man grabbed her around the neck, and those were the exact words used in the confession letter. It also said, let me just look it up. He said, I could just hit you in the head with a piece of wood, this person said. And the confession letter said, I kicked her in the head. And also, the guy who abducted this woman just after the Sherry Joe Bates murder mentioned Jack the Ripper. And then the confession letter said, I will take her body parts and put them all over the city, just like Jack the Ripper did with body parts. So
this was before the confession letter, correct?
This newspaper article came out on November the 24th, 5 days before the confession letter, about this abduction that had happened previously. So whether the confession letter was the Zodiac or the killer of Sherry Joe Bates, it seemed like the confession letter author was mimicking this newspaper article to some extent.
Yeah, it's quite a coincidence if not, right?
Yeah. And we know Zodiac is fond of mimicking newspaper articles. I'm not saying it's a Zodiac, but this person had a similar idea.
Yeah. We have a question here from Cheryl.
Sherry
Yes,
wants to
Cheryl
know.
says, why did he not add the Southern California murders in his count if he did them? I mean, Cheryl, I think most people know that I don't really endorse any of the unconfirmed crimes for this following reason. The Zodiac had a perfect opportunity to write the dates on the corridor at Lake Berryessa, and he chose not to. Now, he may have been playing some type of trolling game and so on, but I just think that we're not completely certain that the Zodiac committed anything outside of the canonical crimes. And, it's not impossible. Like, people just think I'm completely dismissive. Insufficient evidence is what I'm playing right now.
Yeah,
I think. Sorry, I was just going to quickly say I think he did add the Southern murders or the claimed murders into his victim total because it's the first time he wrote 17 plus. So that plus might have been referring to the extra victims he was claiming down south.
Well, sure, and
Yeah.
37 could also refer to that too, right?
Well, I was just specifically honing in on the plus element. If he's now claimed, but also that 17 he was claiming, that was under the Zodiac umbrella. So I think if he'd committed any more crimes before the Zodiac persona was invented, I don't think they would have been included in the total anyway. I think that's probably why he loosely put 17 plus. There's plenty more down there, 17 and plus these. That may have been the reason he used the plus sign.
yeah.
Well,
I mean,
this
he's
was a good-
inconsistent, of course. Like
Go ahead, Druzer.
he says in his letter, pretty clearly that his first victims were at Lake Herman Road. But is that just as the Zodiac? I think he may very well have killed before and after all this Zodiac business. But other than Riverside, there would be nothing anywhere near concrete enough to link him to it. He knew that they didn't have anything else.
Yeah, I mean, he could have easily put 18 if he was claiming the Sherry Joe Bates belatedly. I think that's probably why he wrote the word plus. And he certainly wasn't claiming Sherry Joe Bates from the outset when he claimed 7 victims.
Cherry Joe, Cherry Street.
No,
I don't know about that. I mean, like,
sure you do, Ned.
Could be a coincidence.
I don't, Druzer, because the stance is always like these things are possible about using certain like street names and numbers as signatures. But I said I don't know. I mean, it's I really just think that that's again something that we cannot say we are certain of.
We have a question here for Richard.
Oh, I'll have a look at that then, yeah. Never
Now,
heard of it.
Is this true that Dominga Montoya was bludgeoned to death? She was beaten to death and not committed in any way like the Zodiac victims. So, in terms of a similar MO, even to Sherry Joe Bates was stabbed. But you want to share some other details? But actually, I wanted to come back to something that Melissa said in the chat when she's like, maybe the Zodiac killer was using only specific body counts for certain areas to avoid getting caught. That could be a good observation. If I could find that exact phrasing, I would.
I think that Bakersfield thing might interest Drew Beeson a bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah, he doesn't think that the Riverside crime was Zodiac, but maybe this would change his mind.
Maybe.
But I'm sure Drew will make his comeback like Ross soon. But he was preview for today, Drew. But I think he don't have the time for joining us because he's working.
Yeah, Monday afternoon is going to be hard for some people, for sure.
Yeah, it's Monday afternoon for him. So I try to do my best to have everybody together for let's say, a normal horror, but it's not always easy.
But we do have something here from Ray Grant. He says, "Ask Richard and Ned what happened with the audio of their first interview." Now, I think Ray is referring to the interview with the Experts series, and Richard and I recorded the interview once, and then that one was lost to the test of time, so we re-recorded the interview in 2023, if that's what Ray's asking about. What happened to that? It's with the rest of the Zodiac Killer channel. It's at the bottom of the ocean somewhere. But I am going to do a follow-up reconnaissance, fact-finding mission about that later today this time. This would be tomorrow if you're on the East Coast. I'm going to try and investigate all of these things because people are still asking me some questions about this stuff, and someone has a business proposal for Steve from the Zodiac Killer channel. So we're going to see if we can find everything, answer all those questions.
Yeah, I think the biggest shame there was the fact that the interview with Howard Davis was lost. We can do other interviews now. That was one of the longest interviews he's done, so that was a shame from that respect.
Now, the file should still exist in theory. I mean, but Richard, all I know is that Steve said there was some problem with the audio on the first interview that you and I did, and I have no idea anything further than that. Like, did he say anything to you about that?
No, I think he just said the audio's been lost. But I remember that first interview we did about 40 minutes, and we had to redo it again. So the first interview we did took about 4 hours, didn't it?
Oh yeah, that's right. The first, for some reason, yeah, we did the first 40 minutes, and then he's just like, "Can you start over?" And I'm like, "Yeah, we have time. Not asking too many questions." So that was Richard and I actually did that interview 3 times. And what happened to the outtakes? Bottom of the ocean.
Yeah,
Only
sure.
4 hours? Oh, it was not in a great day, Richard.
No, I think he left the room and he forgot to start the record button or something, hadn't he? Or the record button went off.
I don't know. It's been a couple of years, but
yeah. Anyway, what's the next question?
The Italian cinema where you see the killer hands and feet was popular in the 60s. Yeah?
Oh, Evie, you have the audio and video of the Howard Davis interview saved?
Man of the hour.
Ah.
That was strangely convenient. Keep up the good work, Evie. Ray, that's exactly what I'm going to do because, as I said, somebody wants to approach Steve about asking how much he would need to get the tapes. But we have to remember, sometimes the tapes go in the vault and they do not come out. They experienced this with the Manson family. Tex Watson recorded 20 hours of audio about what happened with the Tate LaBianca murders. They were put onto tapes, put into a vault. Not even Tom O'Neill could get access to them.
Any more questions?
Serial killers. I was like, what's an aerial killer?
Means serial.
Serial killers, yes.
Serial killer.
Hit the S next to the A.
I've also yet to hear anyone talk about how normal it was for all of these serial killers to be operating so close to each other during the exact time.
There's always been a lot of serial killers in America, hasn't there?
Absolutely, and this is something that I talk about a lot on Black Box Online Radio. It really isn't that weird to have multiple serial killers operating in close proximities. Let's look at the Zodiac Killer and the Santa Rosa hitchhiker slayings. I mean, these things are happening almost in a domino fashion. Is it the same killer? Is it different killers? I definitely think different killers. And on the Citizen Detective podcast, Dr. Lee Meller was even hypothesizing that the Santa Rosa hitchhiker slayers were a team for several different reasons. But that's just one of the first ones that come to mind. Also, we have serial killers that are truck drivers who are using the same routes, especially in Canada. And Druzer can probably talk more about the Highway of Tears than I can. And multiple serial killers operating at the same time. And the estimates for the number of serial killers in America always change. 50, 100, 150, sometimes more. It's probably higher because, as somebody once said, a lot of crimes are just unsolved murders. people might not have connected the dots. I don't think it's strange at all.
It's easy. It's easier to commit crimes, I would have thought, in America. The vast expanse of the country, plus the ready access of guns.
Absolutely.
We have Melissa here.
Also, some serial killers would fall victim to other serial killers, and that would be too complicated, I think.
Yeah, that would complicate matters.
I'll take
Charles
very,
Manson.
very solid
So
point.
it's kind of. So they somehow know to stay out of each other's way.
No, I don't think Charles Manson was in the Bay at the time. He was in San Francisco or in the desert nearby San Francisco.
Well, Charles
At
Manson's
Stone
definitely in
Range.
San Francisco before Zodiac activity, before the Spawn Ranch, and before 1969. Melissa seems to be talking about 1969. I mean, Manson's there. He goes to the clinic with Dr. Jolly West, right? And that's when he
Yeah.
meets Mary Bruner, the first Manson girl in San Francisco, right? So, well, I mean, we'd have to get some dates on this things, Melissa, but keep us posted.
Yeah, there's probably lots of serial killers who are operating in California that Zodiac has got connected to multiple times. There were many murders in Costa County, wasn't there? So, and Zodiac has probably been attached to all of them at some point.
Yes, and Richard, what was the name of the woman who was attacked outside of the Coronado Inn in Northern California, and she was stripped naked, and Gray Smith was saying it was the Zodiac killer, but I was just like, single lone female stripped naked. I didn't think that was the Zodiac at all. And the only thing I remember is that it was by a place called the Coronado Inn.
That doesn't ring a bell.
Well, anyway, that sounds like the work of a serial killer to me. I mean, like undressing the victim to that magnitude, and
well, Paul Holes made a few links between some victims. There was one serial killer that was convicted of at least 2 or 3, wasn't there, in Contra Costa County. And then we also had Cosette Ellison. We've got Elaine Davis. We've got Leona Roberts. We've got multiple people from that area. It's amazing because some of these places are smaller than Coventry, and we'd be lucky to get that many murders in a year of this ilk.
Yeah, like you brought up a good point with Paul Holes, because I just said Zodiac, Santa Rosa Hitchhiker Slayers, then the Golden State Killer starts operating in 73, and it's like this really isn't something that is just completely impossible. Lots of serial killers are operating around the same times. We're talking about 69 to 71, then 72, 73, then to 74. I mean, the Zodiac's writing letters in 1974, which most of us accept as authentic, when the Golden State Killer has already started doing his Visalia ransacking. So there's nothing shocking about many serial killers operating at the same time. But yes, I guess we had a question for Richard, though, if Jerome pulls that back up.
Richard, about the amazing coincidence that took place during our debate on Rust channel.
I don't know what Ray means there.
I don't either, actually. I was going to ask you, Richard, what is this?
Amazing coincidence. I remember the debate well. I just don't remember the amazing coincidence. Do you know, Druzer?
I'm not sure what he's talking about there.
No.
I'm sure he'll
Ross
chime in.
Ross maybe could fill us in, but
anything else on Presidio?
Yeah, I'm sure, but there is so much in the chat.
All right, 3 RGs. Ray Grant, Ray, Richard Allen.
Yeah.
Geraci. It's true.
Oh, wow. Right on. Ray Grant, Richard Cano, Ross Tracy, the 3 RGs. Yeah, I'll give you guys that one. Good stuff.
I'd like to ask Ray a question. what he makes of the airplane cement claim. Whether that was whether one of his Zodiacs actually did that or not.
Shouldn't they have forensically been able to test?
That was a question that was in the chat. I have no idea. I would think so if actual glue came off and was left at the scene. I would think they'd be able to identify that, and I think they would have told us if they had.
Well, they take multiple prints. That surely would have took deposits of airplane cement, I'd have thought.
Right.
If they bothered checking for it.
Yeah, Chris said that in the chat, was just like, I really didn't think about that too much in the past, but it's a solid point. It's like if he actually put the airplane cement on, then it should be leaving something behind, right? Even like particles or just small amounts, small deposits, right?
Yeah, exactly. I want to ask Druzer, does he contend that there was no bloody fingerprint on the passenger front door?
Oh, well, I have problem with the phrasing in the report. It doesn't seem clear that they are saying that bloody prints were found on the passenger door, but since we know that there's blood found on the driver's door and that he went to the passenger door first, it may be I don't know, because they found prints on the passenger door and they found prints on the driver's side door. The ones on the driver's side door definitely had some blood. So if they're both from Zodiac, you'd think they both did. But
because, yeah, I mean, the way I interpreted it, it was that there was bloody fingerprints on the passenger door handle and the driver's side door, the dividing panel. And like I said to you before, if there was blood on the outside passenger door handle, then the killer should never have ridden in the front seat, because after he shot Paul Stine and got blood on his fingers, he may have deposited bloody fingerprints on the inside of the door, but there was no need to ever touch the outside door with a bloody fingerprint with bloody fingerprints and then proceed to wipe it off thereafter. How many people get out of a door and shut it with a handle?
Yeah, it's a great point.
Yeah.
No, I mean, to have another go at answering your question, Tom believes it, Butterfield believes it, you believe it, I tend to believe it, but if you look at the actual phrasing on that report, it is not explicit. It says that they're also interested in the it says they're interested in the bloody fingerprints. They believe they're from the culprit, and they're also interested in prints found on the passenger side door. So it's just not explicit that
picture where it rings two of the fingerprints in blood, doesn't it? I'll have to go back and revisit that, because that would be crucial to know, because that would tell you whether he was a front or back seat passenger.
And all they've ever said was that they think he was in the front. But when I say they, I'm not really talking. I mean, we know that's what Palsetti said. That's what.
Yeah, but he wasn't there, was he? I think Ray Grant is bang on.
With
that. Nobody would sit in the front seat on top of that map, that guide, because that was obviously on the passenger seat, and Paul Stine was pulled over it, and then when he was dragged out, that came onto the ground. There's no way a killer would be sitting on that guide all the way through the journey, which is clearly where it was.
Yeah, but if you're entering the front seat with a gun in your hand, maybe he doesn't take the normal. Yeah, I mean, if I'm just entering in back in a seat and there's a book there, I'm going to move it. But if I have something in my hand, maybe I don't. I don't know. No, I see what you're saying. Can I see Ray's comment? The last.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So the airplane cement, that's a '60s thing. The kids used to put balsa wood model airplane glue together, and you would Used to having airplane cement on your fingertips. That's another thing most hobbyists won't get.
Well, I'll get it because I used it when I was a kid.
Yeah, me too.
Well, what I was asking, Ray, is whether you think one of the Zodiacs was doing it.
That would probably be Michael, if anyone.
Sure, I think it is the younger fellows that Ray believes were doing the actual killing.
But we actually have something that's very technical earlier on in the chat, and this is from Baywatcher, who says, "Did police scanners exist back then?" And to answer that one, yes. And I think even Ray talked about this on his YouTube channel about how he had one around the time of the Zodiac murders. I don't know if it was the early 1970s. You said, Ray. I mean, you're in the chat. You can clarify, but yes, police scanners existed at the time, and we even had the dispatcher putting out the incorrect info about the NMA, right? On the night of the Stine murder, if that did indeed happen. But this sort of ties into something else, so that they were responding to when Ray Grant says that after the Blue Rock Springs shooting, there's the phone call, and it was received by Nancy Slover. And Ray says, "I doubt that her account is verbatim, since back then they didn't record incoming 911 calls." And I also believe that that's correct, that there are no recordings ever of the Zodiac calling into the police dispatchers, also after Lake Berryessa. And if somebody ever says that they did, there are no recordings, there never were, and very simply, those calls were not recorded. But yes, they did have police scanners to use as radios in between dispatchers and cars. So yes, I mean, police scanners existed in 68, 69.
I mean, the police report at BRS did say it was the substance of the statement, didn't say it was a verbatim transcription.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it makes a lot more sense that he was describing the ammunition that they would find at the scene, not the gun that they would not find. That was very convoluted. In the message, he mentions, I shot them with a 9mm Luger. He probably said, I shot them with 9mm Luger. And then he followed up on that with the ammunition. But here's my question. Who do you guys think leaked to Dave Peterson in November 1970 about the botched dispatch?
Who leaked it?
Yeah.
Easy answer. I don't know. Richard, Altu.
You mean the Presidio Heights dispatch?
Yeah.
Well, a good guess would be the dispatcher, wouldn't it?
Sure.
It makes sense. Yeah.
If you were accused of making an error and not hearing what the kids have told you correctly, you'd want to clear that up surreptitiously.
Right. And then I guess additionally, someone was Graysmith's source before he wrote his book, because when Peterson wrote about it in 1970, there was almost no detail. It was just that there is a mix-up in the police dispatch.
And it's also I was just to say it's odd that we've heard about Nancy Slover, we've heard about Dave Slate, but this dispatcher we know nothing about. It's fairly convenient.
Well, convenient for them. Yeah.
In the myth of the Zodiac killer, Thomas Horan does claim that that's part of his theory, that the dispatcher never actually said to be on the lookout for an NMA, and what he was hypothesizing was that Falcon Zelms simply assumed that they were on the lookout for the NMA, or let's just say for the black man. And because it ties back to what you guys were just saying about how that doesn't appear to be completely documented, that somebody put out the APB for the NMA. And do you agree or disagree with that? Like, there is no, there's nothing in the report about the NMA?
The NMA would have gone out to all units, wouldn't it? It wasn't just specifically aimed for Falcon Zelms.
Mm-hmm.
It would have been sent to Pelisetti and any other responding units. So are they in accordance with each other that this was sent out over the dispatch, the Negro Mailer Door? Has Pelisetti said it?
it doesn't seem to come out. Like when you hear this version of the story, you simply hear that the dispatcher put out the APB for the blackmail. That's like all I see.
Yeah, I can't believe the kids made the error. I think, like Druzer said, I think that the dispatcher probably misinterpreted it.
I mean, the kids did not make the error. Like, I mean, I just think that's almost certainly not.
No, maybe caused the error through too much noise in the room or something like that. It may be reasonable that the dispatcher got it wrong, but I don't see any reason to believe that the kids at any time thought it was a black man.
Yeah.
There is a lot of difference between a Negro man and a white man. I'm sorry, but there is a big difference in the word.
Maybe the kids talked about how he looks, what he was wearing, like it was black or dark. I remember that he had dark black or navy blue things, wearing these kind of things. So maybe that could have been a misunderstanding. How a guy in black, instead it's interpreted as black guy. That could be one thing. And if I'm not and if I'm not mistaken, I think at around the same time there was probably, I don't know where I remember that from, but there was a black guy on the loose who in that area, some other robberies or crimes against cab drivers had been committed, and I think they were talking about a black guy who's doing these things. So maybe the dispatcher, when they heard it's another cab crime, so maybe assuming it's again this guy, and maybe saying okay, we're looking for a black person. I don't know.
No, I don't know what was the verbiage at the time to describe a black male, but I assume it was a Negro male. I assume, I don't know.
I would have expected the dispatcher to give out the whole description so they could capture this person. And I've never, ever seen a Negro male with blonde crew cut in 1969.
No.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, I mean, there may have been an assumption.
Yeah, but a big assumption who turns wrong because.
Yeah. But I mean, we know what the full report is, but that they would later give. But what the actual dispatcher got from the possibly loud phone call with excited kids, we really don't.
And Dave Peterson could have got this information from another copper who leaked the fact that they made up this story to cover for the what was deemed stupidity of the coppers letting the killer on his way.
Yeah, we're not going to figure it out. And before Falk came forward, we had the Zodiac story, and the cops responded to that before they heard from Falk, presumably, and they said it was ridiculous, which is I don't know, open to interpretation.
See, don't forget that memorandum on November the 12th partly was written in the third person for Donald Falk.
Well, we know it was written in the third person, but we don't know for sure that that can be explained by an additional author. It's possible. It's possible that Falk was just writing in that style for part of the letter, and then writing from a different perspective for the rest of the letter.
I get the notion of somebody standing over his shoulder with a gun at his temple saying, make sure you put Negro in the memorandum.
Could be.
By the way, guys, we have a question here from Cat Daddy Steve, who says, "Did you guys know downtown San Francisco's Wells Fargo Bank was robbed around the time of Paul's murder, and the robber handed the teller a note, 'Give me all the money or I shoot Zodiac'?" Cat Daddy Steve, like, what do you mean around the time of the murder? We're talking about like after dark at night. I mean, a bank, or do you mean it was robbed earlier in the daytime?
December 2nd, 1968.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm the one who wrote it in the first place, so I should know it.
Indeed.
Yeah, there was a note put into a bank, wasn't it? And it was signed Zodiac, and it was in the Zodiac files, and it was dated, like Druzer said, December the 2nd, which would mean, if it was the same person, Zodiac had this pseudonym in his mind before he even committed the Lake Herman Road murders. I mean, it's unlikely. It's unlikely, but obviously the police must have thought it may have been connected to Zodiac because they put it in the Zodiac files.
Well, they put things in these files. I mean, we can't know. It's certainly worth consideration. I wasn't sure whether. I think someone may have gone a little further with that robbery.
Yeah, I heard.
Was anyone ever identified as?
Didn't Craigle claim there was 3 U's identified?
Geez, I don't know, but yeah, it was Craigle.
But I haven't read it personally. But I would like to know how many letters before and after the Zodiac murders were ever signed by Zodiac. Oh no, primarily before the crimes of Zodiac. How many letters you could ever find that was signed in a threatening manner with Zodiac? I'd suspect not many, if any.
No,
I
well,
would say likewise.
Zodiac as a phrase was obviously hot around that time, but not for too many years previously, I wouldn't think.
No, and not in the form of threatening letters.
No, I think it's certainly worth consideration.
But it's strange to rob a bank and say, "Give me all the money or I shoot Zodiac."
That's not exactly what the text said.
Ah, okay.
And also, there was a guy called Black Bart many decades before, wasn't it? Or was it the last century?
A stagecoach robber?
Stagecoach robber, and he wore a black hood, didn't he?
Yeah, and he was a gentleman.
He was a gentleman robber, and he robbed Wells Fargo Bank as well, didn't he?
Mm-hmm.
So there's a little connection with a previous robber of a Wells Fargo who wore a hood. You can find these little coincidences all over the Zodiac case. You can turn yourself into knots, though, can't you?
Absolutely.
We have David here who say, in my opinion, Zodiac was a conservative person trying to show relevance in the current zeitgeist.
David, you mean you think that the Zodiac hated hippies and so on, and he was somebody who was just opposed to the 1960s counterculture, and he was infuriated with the situation, so he created the Zodiac as his own kind of revenge on society angle?
He sort of emulated that culture, though, in his language. Counterculture and stuff.
Be sure.
Do you think he was? Do you think he was a Republican or a Democrat?
Oh, a very, very easy answer, Richard. Independent. No, I think the Zodiac was so full of himself that he didn't really care about, allegiances to the Republicans or the Democrats, and self-serving narcissist.
I was thinking of the Steve McQueen letter where he tended to target Democrats.
If that letter is legit, then I would change my mind. But if that letter is not legit, I say Democrat.
Yeah, and probably the same with the Channel 9 letter. I don't know what affiliations those people had, but they all had connections to religion.
Yeah, it turns the profile
no.
on its head. Those letters.
Could you pull up that comment from Ray Grant again, the first one that you just had up there? I think it's funny that SFPD was less embarrassed by the NMA description than by the Falk-Zelms encounter. Well, this is something that clouds the judgment all the time. And Jerome and I are going to talk about this when we do the Freeway Phantom episode, where people in the media and law enforcement zone in on these race-related issues that are just pure distractions. And, this happens time and time again with like true crime stories where the newspapers especially want to turn this into some type of race issue when that's not the most important issue at hand. Ray is just even talking about how Falcon Zelms may have just had the opportunity to catch the Zodiac killer and they blew it. And they missed him. He went right through their fingertips. Is that not more important? I say yes. Now, the general public would definitely want to hear more about the black man, white man angle, though.
Do you think it's strange that the Falk-Zelms encounter never made it into the newspapers?
No, because it's not exactly certifiable, and we even said this in one of the very first panel discussion shows. We aren't certain as to what actually happened, and I think at that point they were maybe just not. They maybe viewed that as too speculative for reporting.
Well, it wasn't going to help the investigation as far as the public was concerned. So I think it's just another thing that they didn't share. We don't have the rest of the reports. We don't know whether it was discussed, but there wouldn't be a lot of value in letting the public know that, I don't think. And they weren't about to throw Falcon Zelms under the bus by name. It would just be sort of an embarrassment.
You'd have thought there'd been. Sorry, you thought there'd have been many neighbours in that area would have heard those sirens go off and looked out the window on Jackson Street. I'm surprised that no reporters are roving around there asking questions and being told, yeah, we saw somebody speaking to the Zodiac, or we saw cars going past, but that never seemed to manifest either.
Yeah, well, I mean, I guess we got to go back to the did they canvass the area type question. Like we don't know whether they have a whole slew of additional material. We don't have any reason to believe they did. We're talking about two guys that were heading the investigation who never spoke with the only confirmed witnesses they have. I don't even think they spoke with Falk. So they're not doing the kind of thorough job that we would have hoped that they did.
But even if they were thinking that maybe Falcon Zones talked to the Zodiac, I don't know if they would have had enough info to put that in a newspaper, because what if that's completely untrue and it didn't happen or something, and then they're going to be the ones who are going to be looking foolish.
Yep.
Yeah. I've wondered before whether the report that the news story that came out the day after the attack with the sighting of a man running into the park. Now, they didn't know it was Zodiac at that point, so I don't really think that they would be sort of playing with the suspect at that point. But we've never heard anything further about that alleged witness. And I wonder, do you guys think it's possible that maybe that was bullshit?
We have Melissa who asked, do you see a connection between this is the captain speaking and this is the Zodiac speaking?
Now, with this one, I've addressed this in the past, and I was talking about that, and somebody corrected me in the comment section saying, it's not this is the captain speaking, it's this is your captain speaking is the phrase. So they didn't think there was a connection, but I didn't notice that. I mean, I thought they were the same, but what do you guys think?
Where it comes from? This is your captain speaking?
Airplanes and boats.
This is your Zodiac speaking.
Yeah, it could be.
go into the Hairnap files about the Symbionese Liberation Army, you see many references where each individual in that group says, "This is so-and-so speaking." So they use that phrase. But that's probably copied from the Zodiac, maybe.
Yeah, I'd never thought of that before, Richard.
Mm.
David say, yes, he was the type of person reactionary, but his letter were sprinkled, yeah, with comics reference adding to his
Were they?
marketability.
I'm not sure I know of any cosmic references in
Oh, I think he means the
I
stuff
think
like
Zodiac.
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 Yeah.
Zodiac itself.
Mm.
Well, I don't rule out a particular political or ideological motive, maybe something broader that may have an influence on his decisions. And my reasoning for that is basically when police or law enforcement first looked at these crimes, you don't see robbery as a motive. You don't see sexual abuse or sexual motive. You don't see gang related motive. They had a big difficulty to actually uh, find a motive, and what happened is they basically just rendered him into a weirdo, or he's just crazy, he's nuts, blah blah blah. And I have come to see in the readings I've done that in many cases where there is some sort of a political motive, uh, in the beginning it looks like, what's the motive here? We don't have the basic, we don't have the well-known motives like jealousy, like robbery, like sexual assault, like gang-related thing, and they can't really place it somewhere. And it turns out that in some crimes, at least, where you really don't get the motive in the beginning, that you later find certain ideological or political motives. And that's why I don't rule out that there indeed might be some sort of ideological or political, I don't know what you call it, a mindset, an inspiration, maybe a worldview. It could be actually part of what makes the Zodiac. So that's how I see the political or ideological aspect of things.
It
It's
was
possible.
it was Richard Nixon who were in charge at the time
Good. Mm. I
as
think
president.
Richard Nixon was probably just elected around the time. They had this.
Yeah, I think so because
Yeah, and
KFK was
it was
shot
a
in '63.
tumultuous time because I think was it Robert Kennedy who was
Shot
someone,
in '68.
yeah, assassinated. It was the year where I think um,
Martin Luther King was shot.
yeah, MLK was murdered, and I think the whole craziness of, okay, Abraham Lincoln was also assassinated, but in the 20th century, I think you had this really crazy period where you have assassinations, you have civil rights movement, you have the
Yeah,
feminist movement, you have the gay movement, you have like
the
everything that
hippie movement.
challenges social structure. And so it would not be surprising if you would find something related to all that struggle that goes on in culture, society, and politics. Although a lot of people maybe not involved, but I think it was a time where there was a lot of it was a strained relationships between the political parties. You could say that at least, and universities in trouble. I don't know. So there could be some sort of political investment also, maybe not so apparent. Uh, but when I think about it, sometimes I just look at some things. So why would you mention the buttons? You know, don't wear that naughty buttons. Instead, wear my buttons. Referencing a black guy as a Negro, you know, it. Sometimes I think that these are very little expressions of political position, maybe not so apparent. Yeah, you can't say he's a Republican, he's that, he's this, but I would somehow place him on the conservative side of things, in my opinion. Um, Maybe someone who's in general also not very happy of the Republicans, although they are conservative, but somehow it's establishment. Republicans, Democrats. It's the establishment of. It's the framework of politics, basically. And while being on the right spectrum of things, he may be also unhappy with the whole thing that's going on at that time. You know, pissed at the Republicans because they don't stop. This ongoing thing, pissed at the Democrats anyway because, you know, they give rights to the black people, to the women, and blah blah blah. So a lot of stuff could be going on there, but you can't be sure. It's just little droplets that you find about it. You know, using the word Negro. I don't think it's totally normal that someone would do that, you know, at that time. So it indicates some sort of a worldview, in my opinion, or, you know, objecting to the black power buttons, to the what was it? Power to the people buttons. Okay, so I think it kind of reflects a bit that he's not happy with the kind of change that's going on in society. But it's probably only these one or two references, but if you can call them references, of course. It's these two or three things, maybe in another letter, as something that you could interpret like this.
Yeah.
But I think the possibility that ideology was actually an important element to him, whatever it was, I think it could partly explain motive behind his actions. And uh, again, it's interpretationally, but when I think of the first 2 dates on which he strikes, those 2 days are basically the cornerstone of the American calendar, if you wish. You know, 4th of July, you kill on the 4th of July. When everyone's celebrating, having fun, etc. So it's like, sometimes I think like it's like he's saying through this, you know, screw you all, or
Yeah.
you know, Christmas time. Yani Christmas. I mean, it's again a time where union, beliefs, tradition, etc. is celebrated, and you just kind of kill 2 guys in a town, and the next day you basically ruin the Christmas time for these people. And maybe it says something like, you're not serious about these things. This you're not serious that, yeah, you're not true Americans or something like that. I don't know. Maybe he's trying to say something like that, but we don't have enough stuff to really come to a conclusion about that. I have just this hypothesis that if he is a really politically also involved or motivated person, I tend to believe that somehow Zodiac's name is already in the files on the FBI files on the Aryan nations, So maybe police or FBI or law enforcement knows him related to those activities and not really to the crimes. So maybe we have his name already. I don't know. Even before the murders started. It could be a possibility that his name exists somewhere in these files, but then it's hard because the files are almost, it's impossible to read them really. The copies are really bad. I tried to read those files about white suprematist movements. I couldn't get very far into it. So
Okay,
I,
if we're going to
I
jump
left
in
it there anyways. Yeah.
something here,
So
I
that's
really
what,
have to, because what is the evidence that the Zodiac killer would be part of something like the Aryan Brotherhood or Aryan nations?
for example, we take the zodiac symbol as a crosshair, but it could also stand for a Celtic cross wheel, which is symbolism of, which is basically part of the symbolism there. So I'm not forcing it, I'm just saying it could be an avenue to look into. I'm not saying it will yield something, but when we ask ourselves where we could look into, so that would be maybe a place to look into. Like what can we find there? But probably that's a research topic that is probably a bit more down the gagging order, because I mean we have so many things to discuss and discover, and a lot of people would think politics, it's a waste of time. We will not find anything there, so don't look. But
Maybe not.
He never discussed anything politically.
No.
He had his soapbox, and he never used it to express any concern for society. It seems like he read the paper every day. I'm sure he had some views, but really the only thing he did was waste community resources as much as he could.
Yeah, and it's all about him.
Yeah, no, I mean, I hard pressed to make a decision. I say Democrat because they seem to hate cops more than Republicans. But it was clearly society that he was after. I mean, that's who he's threatening.
Yeah, you
All
get deranged individuals in the Democrat Party and the Republican Party. So,
Oh yeah, for sure. I think maybe you can read something into the fact that he didn't give us any real hints about his political leanings.
unless he wrote the 1977 letter.
Yeah, but even then, that's a change. That's a different phase. Where was he 10 years earlier?
Mm. And don't forget the bus threat 4 months before the 1977 letter. Yeah, somebody sent in a letter threatening.
Can you hear me?
Parents and kids visiting people at was it Folsom Prison?
I don't recall the prison.
Yeah, well, he was threatening a bus that took kids and their parents to visit prisoners in the prison. And if you remember, the 77 letter mentioned releasing 3 prisoners. And that was 4 months before that letter came out. So you never know. You never know.
But do you know that the 77 letter is legit?
No, I haven't got a clue. I've looked at it. I can't decide one way or another.
Okay.
The only thing I will say about it is the writing looks very similar to the Fairfield letters. That's all you can say. There is a bit of crossover of language, but nothing more than that.
Yeah, well, if Zodiac wasn't writing from Fairfield, then there was someone in Fairfield who was very committed to the task.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
You know,
who wrote
years.
3 ciphers? Yeah, who wrote 3 ciphers in 3 Fairfield letters?
Yeah, that's why I consider that very possibly Zodiac activity. It just seems so weird that someone would feel so committed, and it's not like they're being rewarded with publication.
No, absolutely. None of them were published, were they? The Fairfield letters, the 148 and the 2 ones in December.
Yeah, to an extent, they tend to confirm themselves.
So it is unusual to get a hoaxer from Fairfield who only puts codes and ciphers into his letters.
Oh, yes, but the question we have here is, who was anti-police back then, who used the term blue meanies and pigs, and have paid homage to the bomber of the police annex? Wouldn't that more likely be a leftist Zodiac? No, not at all, because you might be thinking about, this sounds like counterculture and so on. Cat Daddy Steve is one who said this. You could just as easily make a case that this was somebody who was a failed police officer, rejected from the police academy, or someone who just thought that they were infringing on someone's rights. And, that could be done in a right-wing or left-wing way if it's done about infringement. But being a failed police officer would not require any political affiliation. So, I don't know what you guys would think about that, but using blue pig, paying homage.
The Alameda County Police were called Blue Meanies, and there were riots in Berkeley called the People's Riot. So that's one area he could have got it from. And then, of course, later you had the Blue Meanies mentioned in the Vanishing Point film. Plus, you've got the Beatles.
So you mean,
Yeah.
You mean it's not political? It's just like stuff from movies and the newspapers and such.
Check up the People's Riot. I think it was Berkeley, wasn't it? And the Alamedan police were called Blue Meanies in that riot.
Yeah, I tend to keep it simple and go with the Beatles, but could be.
Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the People's Riot was 1969, wasn't it? Or was it a little bit later?
If it's organized by Berkeley, wouldn't that be a left-wing political movement?
Well,
actually, yeah.
More like clashing, because because you would see some civil rights movements, feminism, gay rights, etc. But you would also see a lot of counter protests. People just like stop, we're losing this country, etc. Just as you have it today. So you had these kind of right-wing organizations as well, and you had also a lot of organized organizations who were trying to organize the patriots also.
But you had Charlottesville, didn't you?
Birch Society and many others. So what I find funny is that someone who is similar in a position where he rejects both sides somehow, but is more like anti-establishment, but you find leftist concepts as well as a bit right-wing concepts maybe. It was Kaczynski, and he's also from Berkeley. So I think that there is a certain, let's say, mindset or a political faction that is not happy with the establishment and sees itself in a position where it actually can be outside of this establishment and deciding to go to the woods, and I will not be part of this. And, the planes, they're releasing these gases and they poison us. And, you see a very strange combination of some sort of environmentalism, but it's not really like the leftist green movement. It's more like, let's return to the times when
To the
the
basics.
earth looked
Yeah.
like God created it and stuff like that. So there can be a really interesting right-wing environmentalism as well.
Yeah, I tend to think it was a Beatles influence because the Channel 9 letter had the Apple sign on it, and it mentioned all good children go to heaven, which is based on a Beatles song. So that part of the Beatles extends from 1970 all the way through up to 1978, which connects two Zodiac letters, in my opinion, through 8 years, sorry. So I've got no doubt
All right,
the Beatles
guys,
had
we're
something
approaching
going
the
on.
4-minute.
Yeah,
So I'm
I'm
going to
gonna
have to sign
shoot.
off for now, but thank you for having me on, Jerome, and thanks Richard and Altug and Druzer and everybody else who was on the panel. And you guys know me, I'm Ned Dehan, Black Box Online Radio. You know where to find stuff about the show, and thanks again.
Yeah.
Bye, Ned.
Bye,
You're
Ned.
following Ned. Thank you very much.
Yeah, I'm gonna have
See
to
you on
shoot.
Friday.
It's getting 1 o'clock here.
I appreciate everyone putting in the time around the world, internationally coming together here.
Yeah.
Really
Yeah.
enjoy it.
What is it where you are? About 7 or 8?
Yeah, 8 o'clock here for me.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, Jerome, I can't make it next week because I'm off to the Cotswolds. So
Oh, no problem.
so I'll
No
have to
problem.
pass next week. So I'll give you advance notice so I don't let you down.
Okay. I have a question for you all, guy. In the canonical murder of the Zodiac, which one you believe it's most likely able to be solved?
Can you say it again?
In the 4 canonical crime. So Blue Rock, Lake Eman Road, Blue Rock Spring, Berryessa, and Presidio Heights. Which crime do you think is the more likely to be solved?
I'd say Presidio Heights because we've got bloody fingerprints.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I was going to say the same. I mean, maybe Lake Berryessa, but even if they had a print match, it wouldn't necessarily be the guy because they're getting him off of. Yeah.
I think if it's going to be a solve, it's going to come from the letters, I think.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good question, though.
Do you know if Michael Maggio is still alive?
Yes.
Yes. It will be great to question him about what he remembers of this specific day, even if it's not easy for him to do it. Is with Brian Hartnell the only witness we have seen the Zodiac or talk with the Zodiac. So it could be something who could help the police or the FBI or the researcher. I mean, everybody was interesting in this case, but I think I may be wrong, but I think he doesn't want to talk about this case anymore. But it will be great to have him or Brian Hartnell to have not maybe new details, but a new view, maybe new observation, maybe something he is remember. I don't know.
Hopefully, no new details.
Yeah.
I'd love to interview Hartnell. I'd love to do it, but
he doesn't want to. And Michael Maggio, I don't think would be much use. He wasn't in the 2007 documentary, so I'm not sure you'd get anywhere with Michael Maggio. Probably a new version. So I think that would be a fruitless avenue.
A friend of the community interviewed Brian Hartnell a couple of years ago, a fellow lawyer, asked him a few questions. But yeah, surely none of these people are interested in doing that at this time. Maybe if something happened in the case.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sure that we don't know
They want to go
everything.
on with their life. But my favorite, I somehow see the key in the Lake Berryessa murder. But probably those people who could connect that crime to a certain person from the past, which they maybe see similarities, like, oh, our friend Dave used to do these kind of things. Oh, I remember there was a Josh who came up with rules about how we should flirt, etc. And it resembles so much what I see there at what I see in Lake Berryessa. And those people who could maybe link the behavior there to some memory of someone in the past, I think those people probably we are about to lose them. And because they're probably now, I don't know, in their 80s or something.
Yeah.
And so, because from where we look at it, it's 50 years later, a lot of speculation, etc. I mean, we discuss sometimes details that actually will not help anything in the crime. It's I feel that also. So I don't know, and it's also very difficult maybe to look into all the past of the persons of interests we have. But we would probably have to find a lot of yearbooks because I think in yearbooks you see sometimes comments of friends about a friend where you think like, that's strange. That looks like this, and not mere appearance, because sometimes, oh, this guy looks like the sketch of the Presidio, and I think it's not really the glasses, it's not really the line of the hair. Of course, it's important, but I think what's more important is what in these yearbooks is said about a specific person. What they put in the yearbook as maybe a funny memory, something like that. And when you look at it, you say like, "Oh my God, this is very similar to uh, what the Zodiac does." And I think it's somewhere there. I mean, really, the stuff that will assist it in the personation of the Zodiac. We deal a lot with appearance, which is also important.
Yeah.
But tying that is probably somewhere in the yearbooks, and it's it's probably somewhere. Let's assume that the Zodiac was, let's say, 30 years old, and maybe he was in college 10 years earlier. So I think it's somewhere in the yearbooks of the early 60s that we will maybe find the
Well,
hints.
I'll conclude by saying I think if we're ever going to solve the case, the answer lies in the 1978 letter. Because we know there's DNA there and we can do a genealogy test on it. And if it turns up to a location relevant to the Zodiac, Vallejo, San Francisco, or anything, we may be onto something with family members. But other than that, I can't see it being solved. And all I will say is I'm going to have to go.
Yeah, it's very late. It's also
It's very late.
So
It's very late, and
Don't worry.
I'm an old fart.
It's okay.
It was a lot of fun, I think.
Yeah, it was nice speaking to you all.
Yeah.
Right, we'll see you on Sunday, Richard.
Oh yeah, I'll see you on Sunday. Yeah, for the we're just going to specifically talk about one thing, aren't we?
Well, that's the plan.
Yeah, I know.
How plans go.
We'll probably end up on the Stine murder.
But yeah, you got to read up on this stuff. You got to be ready because Adam and I,
Well, I'm going to brush up on the articles I've done. So
that's all we'll do.
yeah.
What you guys is doing on Sunday?
we're covering Joseph Paul Franklin. No, sorry,
Oh, you are an old fart.
my brain's falling apart now. Joseph Stephen Holt, we're talking about, and we're talking about the Donna Lass thing in general, I presume. So
Yeah,
that'll be interesting because it's a thing. Probably one of the things I've enjoyed the most.
Yeah, and
You know,
Give us a link, or it's not true.
yeah, yeah. Well, we'll reveal that. We'll reveal that Sunday.
Okay, so it's not a show as far as I can understand.
it's a
you're talking
podcast
between you.
on Planet X
it's
Filmworks, and
podcast,
there's a
okay.
link in the Discord.
Yeah, so okay, I will try
with
to
Ross.
do that. Anyway, thanks Jerome for making this possible, and it's really great to chat to you guys. It's fantastic. I'm really enjoyed to be part of this and able to share an opinion. So thanks a lot. It was a great evening.
Yeah, great to see
See
you.
you
Alta.
the next time, gentlemen.
Yeah, nice to see you. See you
Nice to
soon.
see you.
All right,
See you soon.
later, boys.
Bye then. Bye everyone.
Later,
Yeah.
Bye.
later Richard.
See you.
Bye bye, guys. See you
Bye.
soon.
See you.
I would like to say goodbye to everybody in the chat. Thank you very much to staying to the end, till the end. It's 5 hours, 4 hours. Yeah, wow. It was episode 9 of the mystery of the Zodiac Killer. On Friday, I will have Jerry Buting for an interview. We will do that with Ned. Ned will be my co-host. He will talk about the book of Jerry Buting, and me, I'm going to focus on his life. And on Saturday, we'll have a new show. Let's talk with Ned. We don't know yet what. Oh yeah, we know. It's about the Phantom Killer. Yeah, the Phantom Killer. And on next Monday, it will be episode number 10 of the Zodiac Mystery. So I hope you will have all a nice week and see you soon. Have a good week. Bye, Altug. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks.
You're welcome.